Hello friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. For 17 years, I've hauled logs from the Oregon forests, and I can tell you something most people don't understand. These forests don't play by the same rules as the rest of the world. Douglas firs grow so thick in some valleys that your headlights vanish as if they never existed. Fog rolls in from the Pacific and settles into the hollows, so thick you can almost touch it. And the roads, God, the roads. They wind through terrain that hasn't changed much since the Ice Age, following paths that loggers carved out a century ago with nothing but axes and mules. My name is Rick Holloway, and I drive for Cascade Timber out of Eugene. I've been with the company since 2008, back when diesel was cheap and you could live a decent life without wearing yourself out. But these days, you have to take whatever load they give you, whenever they give it. So on a Tuesday night in October at 11:30 p.m., I was driving east on Highway 58 toward the Willamette National Forest in an empty truck. Morris, the dispatcher who'd been doing this job longer than I'd been alive, called my house while I was getting ready to watch the Blazers game. "Rick," he said, his voice crackling over the phone's speaker, "I need you to do me a favor, a big favor." I muted the TV. Morris never called after hours unless it was important. "What's going on?" "We've got a situation up at the Rigdon camp. They finished cutting a section ahead of schedule, and the logs need to be out by tomorrow morning. Environmental inspectors are coming through, and if those trees are still on the ground when they show up, we're looking at fines that could shut down the whole operation for a month." "Tonight?" I looked at the clock on my wall. "Morris, it's almost midnight." "I know what time it is. Look, I've got nobody else. Patterson's truck threw a rod this morning. Jensen's got his kid in the hospital, and the rest of the guys are already out on runs. You're it. Double rate, cash bonus on top. What do you say?" I thought about my mortgage payment, due in 3 days. Thought about the transmission in my personal truck that was making a grinding noise I couldn't afford to fix. "What's the road?" "That's the thing," Morris said, and I could hear him shuffling papers on his desk. "The usual road up to Rigdon, Forest Service Road 5897, got washed out in last week's storm. They've been using an alternate route, old logging road that connects through from the east side. I'm sending you the coordinates now." My phone buzzed with a text message. I opened it and saw a pin dropped on a map, way up in the mountains, surrounded by nothing but green. I don't recognize this road. It's old, from the 60s or 70s. Hasn't been used much in recent years, but the crew up there says it's in decent shape. Rough in places, but passable. You'll manage. I should have said no right then. Should have told Morris to find somebody else, or to wait until morning, or to eat the fines. But I didn't. I needed the money. And besides, I'd driven just about every logging road in the Cascades at one point or another. How bad could it be? "All right," I said. "I'm in." "Attaboy. Get up there, load out, and bring those logs down to the mill in Oak Ridge. Whole thing shouldn't take you more than 6-7 hours. You'll be home before breakfast." I hung up, grabbed my thermos and my gear bag, and headed out to where my Kenworth was parked in the driveway. The night was clear and cold. Stars scattered across the sky like someone had spilled salt on black velvet. No moon, though. That should have been another sign. The drive from my place in Springfield to the foothills took about 45 minutes. I knew this part of the route by heart. Highway 58 winding up through the mountains, past Lookout Point Lake, into the National Forest. This time of night, there was almost no traffic. Just me and the deer that would occasionally dart across the road, their eyes flashing green in my headlights before they disappeared back into the trees. I pulled off at milepost 37, where Morris had told me the turnoff would be. It took me a few minutes to find it. Just a gap in the trees with a faded wooden post that might have once held a sign. The post was weathered gray, covered in moss, and the only reason I spotted it at all was because I was looking for it. The road itself was barely wider than my truck. Gravel and dirt, with grass growing up the middle where vehicles didn't usually drive. The trees pressed in close on both sides, their branches forming a tunnel overhead. I shifted down, turned on my work lights, and nosed the Kenworth into the darkness. The GPS on my dash showed the route Morris had sent me, a thin gray line snaking up into the mountains. But it also showed something else. According to the satellite map, there was no road here, just solid green forest. I figured it was old data. These maps didn't always show the logging roads, especially the ones that predated satellite imaging. I drove for about 20 minutes, climbing steadily. The road was rough, full of potholes and washouts that I had to navigate carefully, even with the empty flatbed. Twice, I had to stop and back up to get a better angle around a tight switchback. The trees kept getting thicker, bigger, old-growth firs and cedars that had been here since before anyone thought to cut them down. That's when I noticed the first strange thing. Up ahead, caught in my headlights, was a piece of equipment I recognized. An old yarder, one of those massive machines they used to use to drag logs out of the forest. It was ancient, probably from the 50s, sitting rusted and half collapsed about 20 feet off the road. The cables were still attached, disappearing up into the trees like the tentacles of some mechanical octopus. I slowed down as I passed it. The operator's cab was empty, the windows broken out, moss growing over everything. There was something written on the side in faded paint, but I couldn't make it out. What struck me as odd was the location. Why would they have left a yarder this far up a road that was supposedly still in use? Usually, when they abandoned equipment, it was because the road had been decommissioned. I shook off the uneasy feeling and kept driving. The road climbed higher, the air getting colder. I could see my breath fogging up the windshield, and I cranked the heat up another notch. The radio had lost its signal miles back, leaving me with nothing but the rumble of the diesel engine and the crunch of gravel under my tires. Another 15 minutes, and I saw the second thing that bothered me. In the trees to my right, illuminated briefly by my passing headlights, was a building, or what was left of one. A small cabin, maybe an old Forest Service outpost, completely collapsed in on itself. The roof had caved in, and saplings were growing up through the floor, but what caught my attention was the door. It was standing wide open, hanging from one hinge, and in the moment my lights swept across it, I could swear I saw movement inside. I hit the brakes without thinking about it, the truck lurching to a stop. I sat there for a minute, engine idling, staring at the ruin. Nothing moved. No lights, no sounds except the wind in the trees. I told myself it was probably an animal, a raccoon or a deer that had taken shelter in the wreckage. But I didn't believe it. I put the truck back in gear and kept going, checking my mirrors more frequently now. The GPS said I was still on the right route, still heading toward the coordinates Morris had given me. But the road kept getting narrower, the trees kept pressing closer, and I hadn't seen any other tire tracks since I'd turned off the highway. The third thing I noticed was the smell. Even with my windows up and the vents closed, I could smell it seeping into the cab. The scent of wood smoke, old and stale, like someone had built a fire weeks ago and it had never quite gone out. There was no source I could identify, no campfire or chimney, just that persistent smell of burning. I checked the dashboard. The truck's temperature was fine, no warning lights, nothing overheating, but the smell kept getting stronger. At 1:47 a.m., according to the clock on my dash, I came around a bend and saw something that made my hands tighten on the wheel. There, nailed to a tree at eye level, was a sign. It was hand-painted on a piece of plywood, the letters crude and uneven. Turn back. That was all it said. No explanation, no official seal, no indication of who had put it there or why. Just those 2 words in faded red paint. I stopped the truck again, this time leaving it in gear with my foot on the brake. I sat there staring at that sign, and for the first time since I'd left home, I seriously considered turning around. The road behind me was barely wide enough to turn around in, but I could probably manage it if I took my time. Back down to the highway, back to my house. Call Morris in the morning and tell him I couldn't find the road. But then I thought about the money. The double rate, the cash bonus, the mortgage payment, the transmission. I thought about Jensen's kid in the hospital, about Patterson's broken-down truck, about all the guys who were depending on loads like this to keep Cascade Timber in business. I thought about 17 years of driving these roads without incident. 17 years of knowing these mountains better than most people knew their own neighborhoods. I put my foot back on the gas and drove past the sign. The road got worse after that. The potholes got deeper, the washouts wider. Twice I had to gun the engine to make it through muddy sections where the truck's wheels spun before catching traction. The trees were massive now, old-growth monsters that would have taken 3 or 4 men holding hands to encircle. Their bark was black with moisture, and in my headlights they looked less like trees and more like the walls of a tunnel closing in around me. At 2:15 a.m., the road suddenly opened up into a clearing. I almost didn't believe it at first. After miles of that claustrophobic forest, the sudden open space felt wrong, like I'd driven into a void. I stopped the truck and got out, needing to stretch my legs and clear my head. The clearing was maybe 50 yards across, roughly circular, with the road cutting straight through the middle. The ground was covered in gravel and packed earth, and in the center there was a fire ring made of stones. The ashes inside looked fresh, not smoking, but not old either. A few days at most. I walked over to the fire ring and crouched down next to it. The ashes were definitely recent. I could see the remnants of burned wood, the charred ends still recognizable. Someone had been here, and not long ago, but there were no other signs of occupation. No tent, no vehicle tracks, no trash, just the fire. I stood up and looked around the clearing. That's when I saw them. At the edge of the clearing, right where the trees started again, there were markers. Wooden stakes, maybe 2 feet tall, driven into the ground in a rough circle around the fire ring. There were dozens of them, all identical, all spaced about 10 feet apart. I walked over to the nearest one and examined it. The stake was fresh cut, the wood still light-colored, not weathered. There was nothing carved or painted on it, no indication of what it was marking. I grabbed it and tried to pull it out of the ground, but it wouldn't budge. It was driven in deep, deeper than it needed to be for any surveying or marking purpose I could think of. The wind picked up, and I heard something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was a sound like wind chimes, delicate and metallic, coming from somewhere in the trees. I turned slowly, trying to locate the source, but it seemed to come from everywhere at once, or nowhere. I got back in my truck faster than I cared to admit. Locked the doors, which was stupid. What was I going to lock out in the middle of the forest? And checked the GPS again. According to the coordinates, the Rigdon camp was still about 8 miles ahead, higher up the mountain. I drove through the clearing and back into the trees. The road on the other side was even worse than before, barely more than a trail. Several times, branches scraped along the sides of my truck with a sound like fingernails on metal. The canopy overhead was so thick now that my headlights seemed to create more shadows than illumination. At 2:47 a.m., I rounded another switchback and saw lights ahead. Finally, I felt relief wash over me. The camp, the crew, other people. But as I got closer, I realized the lights weren't moving. They were just sitting there, stationary, about 50 yards ahead. I slowed down, confused. As I got nearer, I could see that the lights were actually reflectors, the kind they put on road signs or barriers. They were attached to something in the middle of the road, something big and dark that I couldn't quite make out. 20 yards away, I stopped and grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket. I left the truck running, I wasn't making that mistake, and climbed down from the cab. The temperature had dropped even further, and I could see frost forming on the gravel. The object in the road was a truck, not a logging truck like mine, but an old pickup, probably from the 70s, based on the body style. It was parked sideways, completely blocking the road, and it had been there for a while. The tires were flat, the windows covered in condensation on the inside, and when I got close enough to see through the windshield, I saw that the front seats were covered in what looked like moss or mold. The driver's door was open. I stood there with my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness, and tried to make sense of what I was seeing. The truck was ancient, abandoned, but those reflectors on the back were clean and bright, like someone had put them there recently. Why would anyone do that? I walked around to the open door and shined my light inside. The interior was gutted, seats torn up, dashboard cracked and peeling, steering wheel missing. But on the passenger seat, sitting in the middle of all that decay, was a map. A paper map, the old fold-out kind, and it looked brand new. I reached in, and I'm still not sure why I did this, and picked up the map. It was a topographical map of the Willamette National Forest, the kind that the Forest Service used to hand out at ranger stations. I unfolded it and immediately saw that someone had drawn on it with a red marker. A route, starting from Highway 58 and climbing up into the mountains along a road that, according to the map, didn't exist. My road. The exact road I was on. But that wasn't the disturbing part. The disturbing part was the X marked at the end of the route, drawn in the same red marker with a single word written next to it. Stop. I folded the map back up, my hands shaking now, and looked at the old truck. Whoever had driven it here, they'd been following the same route I was, and they'd left this map, this warning, for whoever came after. I walked back to my Kenworth, map in hand, and climbed into the cab. I sat there for a long minute, the engine rumbling, trying to decide what to do. The old pickup was blocking the road, but I could probably squeeze past it if I went slow and kept my wheels on the extreme edge of the gravel. The trees were thick, but there might be just enough room. Or I could turn around. The clearing would be big enough to maneuver a turn. I could be back on Highway 58 in an hour, back home in 2, safe. I looked at the map again, at that red X, at the word stop. Then I looked at my GPS, which still showed the coordinates Morris had given me, still showed that I was on the right route, still showed the Rigdon camp just a few miles ahead. I chose wrong. I put the truck in gear, turned the wheel hard to the right, and inched forward past the abandoned pickup. My mirrors were maybe 3 inches from the tree trunks, and I heard branches scraping along the passenger side, but I made it through. Once I was clear, I straightened out and kept driving, the map sitting on the passenger seat next to me. The road climbed steeper now, the engine straining, the transmission downshifting automatically to maintain traction. I could feel the truck swaying slightly as the road narrowed even further. This wasn't a logging road anymore, this was barely a trail, something that maybe ATVs used, if anyone used it at all. At 3:23 a.m., according to my dash clock, I crested a ridge, and the forest suddenly fell away on my left. I was high up on the mountain now, high enough that I could see out over the canopy. Below me, stretching for miles in every direction, was an ocean of trees. dark and endless. No lights anywhere, no sign of civilization, just forest. I looked to my right, where the mountain rose up, and that's when I saw it. Cut into the hillside, barely visible in my headlights, was a structure. Not a cabin this time, but something else. It looked like the entrance to a mine, an arched opening framed with timber, disappearing into the mountain. I stopped the truck and stared at it. There was no reason for a mine to be up here. Oregon had some mining history, sure, but not in this part of the Cascades. This was logging country, always had been. The entrance was maybe 15 feet wide and 10 feet high, the timber framing weathered but intact. I couldn't see more than a few feet into the darkness beyond the entrance, even with my work lights on. But I could hear something, a sound like water dripping, echoing from somewhere deep inside the mountain. I sat there for what felt like a long time, looking at that mine entrance. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get the hell out of there, to turn around, to go back. But I couldn't. The road ahead was too narrow to turn around, and the idea of backing down miles of switchbacks in the dark was almost worse than going forward. So I drove on. The road leveled out after the mine entrance, following the ridgeline for maybe half a mile before plunging back into thick forest. The trees here were different, dead or dying, their branches bare and skeletal against the night sky. I didn't know enough about forestry to say what had killed them, but whatever it was, it had affected every tree in this section. They stood like grave markers, white and ghostly in my headlights. My CB radio, which had been silent since I left the highway, suddenly crackled to life. Static at first, then something that might have been a voice too distorted to make out words. I grabbed the handset. "This is Cascade 23. Anybody copy?" My voice sounded strange in the cab. Too loud, too desperate. More static. Then, clearer this time, I heard, "Turn around." My blood went cold. "Say again, you're breaking up." "Not supposed to be." "Turn around." "Who is this?" "Morris, is that you?" The static changed pitch, became almost a whine, and then the radio went dead. I tried it several more times, cycling through all the channels, but got nothing, not even static. It was like the radio had just stopped working entirely. I checked my cell phone. No signal, which wasn't surprising this deep in the mountains, but what was surprising was that the GPS had frozen. The screen showed my position as a blue dot on a gray blank space. No roads, no topography, nothing. The coordinates were still there, the destination Morris had given me, but they seemed impossibly far away now, like they were receding as I drove toward them. The temperature inside the cab kept dropping despite the heater running full blast. I could see my breath now, and the windows were starting to fog up from the inside. I cranked the defroster, but it didn't seem to help much. At 3:51 a.m., I came around a curve and almost drove straight into a washout. The road just ended. A section, maybe 20 feet across, had collapsed down the mountainside, leaving a gap that my truck could never cross. I hit the brakes hard. The cab, lurching forward, stopped with my front bumper about 3 feet from the edge. I sat there breathing hard, hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles were white. This was it, the end of the road. I'd have to back out somehow, all the way back to a place wide enough to turn around. Then I saw the tire tracks. They went right up to the edge of the washout and then continued on the other side. Fresh tracks, recent, made by something big, another semi from the look of it. The tracks were so fresh I could see where individual stones had been disturbed, turned over to show their wet undersides. I got out of the truck and walked to the edge of the washout, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The gap was maybe 15 feet across, but it wasn't just a gap. It was a complete collapse. The road surface gone, leaving a steep drop down the mountainside, maybe 40, 50 feet down to where I could see broken trees and disturbed earth. But on the other side, the road continued, and those tire tracks led away into the forest. I walked the perimeter of the washout, looking for any way across. There wasn't one. The edges were unstable, loose gravel and dirt that shifted when I stepped on it. Even if I'd had a bridge, which I didn't, I wouldn't have trusted the ground on either side to support the weight of my truck. Yet someone had crossed. Recently. I stood there trying to work it out. Maybe the tracks were old from before the washout, but they looked fresh, and besides, the washout itself looked recent. I could still see raw earth, not yet weathered by rain. Maybe there had been another route, a bypass I'd missed. But I'd been watching carefully, and I hadn't seen any turnoffs. I walked back to my truck and sat in the cab, leaving the door open, trying to think. The radio crackled again, making me jump. "They don't want you there." I grabbed the handset. "Who is this? What are you talking about?" "The road knows. Turn back while you can. Listen to me," I said, my voice cracking. "I'm stuck up here. There's a washout. I need help getting down." The voice came back, clearer now, and I realized with a shock that it was a woman's voice. "There is no washout, Rick. There never was. You're seeing what it wants you to see." How did she know my name? "Who are you? How do you know who I am?" "I drove this road," the voice said, and now I could hear something in it. Fear, or maybe sadness. 3 years ago, they told me the same thing you were told. A camp that needed servicing, an alternate route, good money. I got as far as the mine before I turned around. "How are you on my CB? Where are you?" "I'm not anywhere," she said, and the static was building again, drowning out her words. I tried to warn the next one, and the next one, but they never listen. They never turn back. "Please, Rick, please turn back. Don't go to the camp. There is no camp. There never was." "Wait," I shouted into the handset. "What happened to you? Are you okay?" But there was only static now, and then silence. I tried calling out several more times, but got no response. The radio was dead again. I sat there in the open door of my truck, the night air freezing, my mind racing. This didn't make sense. None of it made sense. Morris had given me coordinates, a destination. There had to be a camp up here, had to be logs to haul. This was a job, a real job, not some kind of hallucination. But that voice, she'd known my name. She'd known about the road. I pulled out my cell phone and tried calling Morris, even though I knew there was no signal. The screen lit up, showing 0 bars, but then something strange happened. A text message appeared, even though there was no signal to receive it. It was from a number I didn't recognize. The message said, "Turn back now." I stared at it, my hands shaking. Then another message appeared, from the same number. "They are watching." I looked up, out through the windshield into the forest. The dead trees stood silent and still. Nothing moved, but I had the overwhelming sensation of being observed, of eyes on me from every direction. A third message. "The camp is not what you think." I thumbed through my phone, looking for the message Morris had sent me with the coordinates. It was still there, but when I tapped on it, the pin on the map shifted. It moved north, maybe half a mile, to a location that wasn't on any road, wasn't near anything, just a point in the middle of dense forest. I watched, horrified, as the pin moved again, this time south, then east. It was wandering around the map like it couldn't decide where it wanted to be, like the destination itself was uncertain. Then my phone went dark. Completely dark. It didn't shut down, didn't show a low battery warning, it just went black, and when I tried to turn it back on, nothing happened. I sat in the silence for a long moment. Then I got out of the truck, walked around to the back, and checked my load, or lack of load. The empty flatbed sat there, waiting for logs that I was beginning to think didn't exist. When I walked back to the front of the truck, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. On the ground, maybe 10 feet in front of the washout, there was something dark. I walked over to it, flashlight in hand. It was a stain. A dark, reddish-brown stain, soaked into the gravel and dirt. It was roughly circular, maybe 3 feet across, and when I crouched down and looked closer, I could see that it had soaked deep into the ground. This wasn't recent. This had been here for a while, maybe months or years. But fresh tire tracks ran right through it. I stood up quickly and backed away, my heart hammering. I walked back to the edge of the washout and shined my light down into the gap. In the beam of my flashlight, I could see something at the bottom of the slope. Something metal, glinting. I angled the light, trying to get a better view. It was hard to make out from this distance, but it looked like a truck, or parts of one. A cab, twisted and crushed, half buried in the earth and debris. I couldn't see any markings. Couldn't tell how long it had been there, but it looked old. Really old. I thought about the woman on the radio. I tried to warn the next one, and the next one. How many had there been? How many trucks had driven up this road and never driven back down? I made my decision then. I was getting out of here, whatever it took. If I had to back down the entire mountain in the dark, I'd do it. If I had to abandon my truck and walk, I'd do that too. But I wasn't going any further up this road. I climbed back into the cab, put the truck in reverse, and started backing up. The road was terrifyingly narrow, and I had to crane my neck around to see where I was going using my mirrors and backup camera. The trees seemed closer than before, their branches reaching out toward the truck like they wanted to grab it, pull it into the forest. I'd gone maybe 50 yards when I heard the sound, a deep, resonant boom, like thunder, but coming from inside the mountain. The whole truck shook with it, and I stopped, my foot on the brake, waiting for it to pass. It came again, louder this time, and then again, settling into a rhythm. Boom, 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 like something massive, something impossibly large, walking through the mountain, each footstep shaking the earth. The dead trees around me started to sway, not from wind, but from the vibrations. I could hear branches breaking, falling to the ground. Dust and small rocks were sliding down the hillside to my right, dislodged by the shaking. I put the truck back in gear, not caring any more about being careful, and hit the gas. The truck shot backward, tires spinning on the gravel. I clipped a tree with my rear corner, heard the crunch of metal, but kept going. The booming sounds were getting louder, more frequent, like whatever was making them was getting closer. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. Complete silence again, so total that it felt like pressure on my eardrums. I stopped the truck and sat there, breathing hard, listening. Nothing. No wind, no animals, no distant sounds of civilization. Just silence. And then I heard it. A voice calling from somewhere up ahead on the road, from the direction I'd been going. A man's voice, clear and strong. "Rick! Hey, Rick, you up there?" I froze. It sounded like Morris. It sounded exactly like Morris. "Rick, can you hear me? We've been trying to reach you on the radio." I looked at my CB. Still dead. No lights, no static, nothing. "Rick, listen, there's been a mistake. You need to come back up to the camp. We're all waiting for you. We've got the logs ready to load. Come on back. We're burning daylight here." It was full night. There was no daylight to burn. "Rick, don't make me come looking for you, buddy. Just turn that truck around and come on up. It's just around the bend. You're almost here." The voice was definitely Morris's, but something about it was wrong. The cadence was off. The inflection strange. Like someone doing an impression of Morris. Or like Morris himself, but subtly changed in some way I couldn't quite identify. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it up the road, in the direction the voice had come from. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the dead trees, the narrow road, the shadows between the trunks. And standing there, maybe 100 yards up the road, was a figure. It was too far away to make out details, but it was person-shaped, tall, standing perfectly still in the middle of the road. As I watched, it raised one arm and waved, a slow, deliberate gesture. "Come on, Rick," the voice called again, and I could see now that it wasn't coming from the figure. The figure's mouth wasn't moving, wasn't even visible. The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "We're all waiting. It's just around the bend. You can see the lights from here." I looked past the figure, and to my shock, I could see lights. Faint and distant, but definitely there. The warm glow of work lights like you'd see at a logging camp. I could even hear very faintly the sound of machinery, of people talking and working. The figure waved again, then turned and started walking up the road toward the lights. After a few steps, it stopped and turned back, gesturing for me to follow. I sat there, hands on the wheel, torn. The camp was real. I could see it, hear it. Maybe I'd been wrong about everything. Maybe the woman on the radio had been a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and stress. Maybe the washout had been a trick of the light. Maybe I'd just been driving for too long, my mind playing tricks on me. The figure waved again, more insistently. I put the truck in drive and started forward, slowly. As I drove, the lights got brighter. The sounds got clearer. I could hear the clank of chains, the rumble of heavy equipment. Voices calling to each other. It sounded real. It sounded exactly like a logging camp should sound. The figure stayed ahead of me, walking at just the right pace to stay in my headlights. I couldn't make out any features. It was just a dark shape, silhouetted against the growing light ahead. We rounded a bend, and there it was. The camp. Lights blazing, trucks parked in a clearing, stacks of logs ready for loading. I could see people moving around, working, doing all the normal things you'd see at a logging operation. I felt relief wash over me. I'd been wrong. This was real. This was the job. I drove into the clearing and stopped, putting the truck in park. The figure that had led me here was gone. I didn't see where it went. It just wasn't there anymore. I didn't think much about it. I was just glad to see other people. I opened the door and climbed down from the cab. The ground felt strange under my boots, too soft, too yielding. I looked down and saw that I wasn't standing on gravel or dirt, but on something dark and organic, like mulch or compost. It had a smell, too, not unpleasant, but strange, like mushrooms or damp earth. "Hello?" I called out. "I'm here for the pickup. Morris sent me." The workers didn't respond. They kept moving, kept working, but none of them looked at me. I walked closer to the nearest one, a big guy in a flannel shirt and suspenders, loading logs onto a truck with a winch. "Excuse me," I said. "Can you tell me who's in charge here?" The man didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge me at all, just kept working. His movements mechanical, repetitive. I reached out and touched his shoulder, and that's when everything changed. The moment my hand made contact, the man went completely still. Then, slowly, he turned his head to look at me. Where his face should have been, there was nothing. Not a blank space, not a blur, nothing. An absence, a void, like looking into a hole in the world. I stumbled backward, and that's when I realized that all the workers had stopped. They were all turning to look at me, all of them faceless, all of them perfectly silent. The lights started to flicker. The sounds of machinery and voices began to distort, stretching out, slowing down like a record player winding down. The logs on the ground started to sink into that dark, organic soil, disappearing inch by inch. I ran. I didn't think, didn't plan, just turned and ran back to my truck. Behind me, I could hear movement, the sound of many feet on soft ground, all moving in the same direction. Toward me. I reached my truck, yanked the door open, and threw myself into the cab. Slammed the door, locked it, turned the key. The engine caught immediately, thank God, and I threw it into reverse, backing out of that clearing as fast as I dared. In my mirrors, I could see them. The faceless workers, standing in a line at the edge of the clearing, watching me go. As the lights from the camp flickered and died, they faded with them, becoming shadows, then nothing. I kept backing up until I found a wide enough spot to turn around. Then I pointed the nose of my Kenworth downhill and drove, faster than I should have, not caring about the rough road or the narrow clearances. I just needed to get away from that place, away from those things, away from that road. I drove hard for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 or 40 minutes, the truck bouncing and lurching over the rough road. My headlights swept across the dead trees, the narrow track, the shadows between the trunks. I kept expecting to see that washout, the one that had made me turn back in the first place, but it never appeared. The road was continuous, damaged and rough, but passable. I should have recognized that as another bad sign, but I was too focused on getting down to think clearly. At some point, I couldn't tell you exactly when, the dead trees gave way to living ones again. The change was sudden, like passing through a curtain. One moment I was driving through that skeletal forest, the next I was back among the Douglas firs and cedars, their branches full and green even in the darkness. I checked the GPS. Still frozen, still showing me as a blue dot in gray space. I checked my phone. Still dead. The CB radio was silent, not even static. But I was descending, I could feel that much. The road was dropping in elevation, winding down the mountain the same way it had wound up. I just had to keep going, keep following it down, and eventually I'd hit the highway again. I'd be safe. That's what I told myself. At 4:47 a.m., according to my dash clock, I passed the clearing with the fire ring. I recognized it immediately. The circular open space, the stones arranged in the center, the wooden stakes around the perimeter. But something was different. The fire was burning now, flames leaping up into the night, casting dancing shadows across the gravel. I didn't slow down, didn't stop to investigate. I kept my foot on the gas and drove straight through, and as I passed, I thought I saw figures around the fire. Dark shapes, person-sized, standing motionless in the flickering light. But I didn't look close enough to be sure. A few miles later, I came across the abandoned pickup truck, the one that had been blocking the road. It was in the same position, sideways across the track, driver's door open. But the map I'd taken from the passenger seat was back where I'd found it, unfolded, the red route clearly visible even from my cab. I steered around the truck, same as before, scraping my mirrors on the trees. As I passed, I glanced at the cab and saw something that made my blood run cold. There was someone sitting in the driver's seat. I caught just a glimpse, a pale face, dark eyes, mouth open like they were screaming or trying to warn me, and then I was past it, and I wasn't about to stop. The road got narrower, which didn't make sense. It should have been getting wider as I descended, easier to navigate, but instead it was constricting, the trees pressing closer, branches scraping along both sides of my truck with a sound like claws on metal. I checked my mirrors compulsively every few seconds, expecting to see headlights behind me, or that figure from the camp, or something worse. But there was nothing, just darkness and trees, and the narrow ribbon of road illuminated by my taillights. Then I noticed something in my passenger side mirror. Movement, keeping pace with my truck. I turned my head to look, but there was nothing there. When I looked back at the mirror, I saw it again. A shape, dark against the trees, running alongside my truck. Not like an animal runs, but with a strange gliding motion, like it was floating just above the ground. I sped up. The shape kept pace easily, matching my speed exactly. When I slowed down to navigate a tight curve, it slowed with me. It was staying in my blind spot, just at the edge of my peripheral vision, never quite visible when I looked directly at it. The CB radio crackled to life again, making me jump so hard I swerved and nearly hit a tree. "You can't outrun it, Rick." It was the woman's voice again, but clearer now, more immediate. "What is it?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What's following me?" "It's not following you," she said. "You're taking it with you. You were at the camp. You saw them. You made contact. Now it knows you." "Knows me? What the hell does that mean?" "It means you're marked," she said, and I could hear genuine sorrow in her voice. "It means it will find you, no matter where you go. The road doesn't end when you get back to the highway, Rick. The road never ends, not for us." "Who are you?" I demanded. "Tell me who you are." There was a long pause, filled with static. Then, "My name was Jennifer Marsh. I drove for Timber Ridge Logistics out of Bend. 3 years ago, I took a night run up to a camp that didn't exist. They told me I'd be home before breakfast." Are you still up here? Somewhere on this mountain?" "I don't know where I am," she said, and her voice was fading now, the static building. "I got off the mountain, made it back to the highway, drove all the way home. But the road came with me. It's in my house now, Rick. It's in my mirrors. It's in every dark hallway, every closed door. I can't escape it. None of us can." "There are others? So many others," she whispered. "We all made the same mistake. We all went to the camp. And now we're all on the road. Forever." The radio went dead again. I was shaking so hard I could barely keep the truck steady. In my passenger mirror, the shape was still there, closer now. I could almost make out features. Something tall and angular with too many limbs, or limbs that bent in wrong directions. I came around a bend and saw lights ahead. Real lights, not the fake ones from the Phantom camp. I could see the glow of streetlights, the reflection of headlights on pavement, the highway. I was almost there. I gunned the engine, pushing the truck as fast as it would go on the rough road. The lights got closer, brighter. I could see the highway now, see cars passing in the distance. Normal cars, normal people, going about their normal lives. The shape in my mirror was falling behind, unable or unwilling to follow me out onto the paved road. I felt a surge of relief. I was going to make it. I was going to get off this mountain and never ever come back. I hit the highway doing 40, not even slowing for the turn. Rubber squealed as I merged into the lane, and a car behind me blared its horn, but I didn't care. I was off that road. I was safe. I drove straight through to Oak Ridge, didn't stop, didn't slow down. When I reached the mill, the sun was just starting to come up, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. I pulled into the yard, shut off the engine, and just sat there for a long time, shaking. My phone buzzed. Signal had returned. I had 17 missed calls, all from Morris. I called him back. "Rick, Jesus Christ, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for hours." "I was on the mountain," I said, my voice hoarse. "Where you sent me." "What are you talking about? I didn't send you anywhere. I called you last night to see if you could take a run this morning, but you didn't answer." I pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at it, confused. "Morris, you called me at midnight, told me about a pickup at Rigdon Camp, gave me coordinates. Rick, I was asleep at midnight, and there is no Rigdon Camp. That whole area got shut down 5 years ago after the Forest Service found endangered owl habitats. Nobody's been allowed to log up there since." I sat there in silence, trying to process this. But you sent me a text with coordinates. I didn't send you anything. Rick, are you okay? You sound really rough. I checked my phone. The text from Morris was still there, the one with the coordinates. I tapped on it to show him, but the screen went fuzzy, the text dissolving into pixels and then disappearing entirely. When the screen cleared, there was no text, no coordinates, no record of any communication from Morris after our last legitimate call, 3 days ago. I need to go, I said, and hung up before he could respond. I got out of my truck and walked around it, checking for damage. Both sides were scratched to hell from the trees, long gouges in the paint and metal. The passenger side mirror was cracked, but otherwise the truck was intact. I climbed back in the cab and looked at the map I'd taken from the abandoned pickup. Except it wasn't there. I searched the cab, the floor, the passenger seat, everywhere. The map was gone. The GPS came back to life, the screen showing my current location at the mill in Oak Ridge. I scrolled back to show where I'd been, looking for that road, those coordinates, any evidence of where I'd spent the last 6 hours. There was nothing. According to the GPS, I'd driven straight from my house to the mill. No stops, no detours. Like that road had never existed. I reported the truck damage to Cascade's maintenance department. Told them I'd scraped against some trees on a narrow Forest Service road. They grumbled about it, but didn't ask too many questions. I took the next 3 days off, told Morris I was sick. He didn't push. For a while, I thought I'd made it. I thought I'd escaped. The road didn't come home with me. My mirrors showed only what they were supposed to show. The hallways in my house stayed exactly the length they'd always been. I started to convince myself that it had all been a hallucination, a stress-induced breakdown, maybe carbon monoxide poisoning from a leak in the truck's exhaust system. But then, 2 weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered and heard static, and then that voice, Jennifer Marsh's voice. "It's patient, Rick," she said. "It doesn't rush. It waits for you to forget, to let your guard down. And then it comes back. The road comes back." "Leave me alone," I said. "I'm done with this. It's over." "It's never over," she said. "Check your GPS." I pulled out my phone and opened the GPS app. There, saved in my destinations, was a pin, a location deep in the Willamette National Forest far from any paved road. The same coordinates Morris had supposedly sent me that night. I deleted it. Immediately, it reappeared. I deleted it again. It came back. I deleted it 20 times, and every time it returned. I threw my phone across the room. It hit the wall and the screen cracked, but when I picked it up later, the coordinates were still there, still waiting. That was 6 months ago. I still drive for Cascade Timber. Still take runs through the Cascades, still haul logs down from the mountains, but I don't take night runs anymore. I tell Morris I've got insomnia, that I need to drive during the day to stay alert. He grumbles, but he gives me the daytime routes. It doesn't matter, though. The road finds me anyway. Sometimes, when I'm driving a perfectly normal route, a road I've driven 100 times before, I'll see a turnoff that wasn't there before. A gap in the trees, a faded wooden post, gravel and dirt disappearing into the forest. I don't take these turnoffs. I keep driving, eyes straight ahead, pretending I don't see them. But they're there. They're always there. My CB radio still picks up voices sometimes. Jennifer Marsh mostly, though sometimes I hear others. Men and women I don't know, with stories like mine. All of them trapped on roads that don't exist. They all want to warn me, to tell me to turn back, but there's nowhere to turn back from. The road is everywhere now. I've tried to find Jennifer, looked up Timber Ridge Logistics, found that they went out of business 2 years ago. I tracked down some of their old drivers, asked if anyone remembered her. One guy did, said she'd disappeared on a run 3 years back, her and her truck both. They found the truck a week later, parked at a rest stop outside of Bend, empty, keys still in the ignition. They never found Jennifer. I asked if there had been others. Drivers who'd disappeared or come back different. He gave me a strange look and told me there had been a few over the years. Drivers who'd taken night runs to remote camps and never quite made it back, even when their trucks did. He said the company stopped sending people to certain parts of the forest after a while. Too many incidents, too many questions. I think about Morris's call sometimes, the one that probably never happened. I think about how real it seemed, how I never questioned it, how I just took the job and went. I wonder if that's how it works. If the road doesn't pull you in with force, but with familiarity, with the routine of the job, the promise of money, the simple human desire to help out when someone asks. I wonder how many other drivers got the same call. How many of them took the same route I did? How many of them are still up there, driving roads that shift and change, looking for camps that dissolve when you get too close? Last week, I saw the old pickup truck. Not on the mountain, not on some forgotten logging road, but on Highway 58, parked at a scenic overlook. Same truck, same faded paint, same passenger door hanging open. I almost stopped, almost walked over to check if that map was still on the seat. But I kept driving, and when I checked my rearview mirror, the truck was gone. The coordinates are still on my phone. I've tried everything. Factory reset, new SIM card, new phone entirely. Doesn't matter. They always come back. Sometimes they move. Shifting a few miles north or south or east, like the destination is searching for something, or like it's waiting for me to finally give in and follow them. I dream about that road sometimes. The dead trees, the fire ring, the mine entrance carved into the mountain. I dream about the camp that wasn't a camp, about the faceless workers loading logs that weren't real. I dream about what's in that mine, what's making those booming sounds deep in the mountain. I dream about what would have happened if I'd kept driving, if I'd gone past the camp, further up the mountain to wherever the road actually leads. I don't think I want to know. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. I look at the other drivers sometimes, the ones I see at the truck stops and the mills, the ones who look just a little too tired, a little too jumpy, checking their mirrors a little too often. And I wonder how many of them have been on that road. How many of them have their own coordinates that won't delete, their own voices on the CB warning them to turn back. How many of us are there driving in circles trying to stay off a road that's already inside us? Last night, I got a text from Morris. A real one this time, I think. It said they need someone to take a night run up to the Willamette. Some kind of emergency pickup, double pay. I deleted it, but my fingers hovered over the keyboard, thinking about the money, thinking about how I could really use it, thinking about how it would only take a few hours. That's how it gets you. That's how it always gets you. I didn't respond to Morris. I turned off my phone and went to bed. But I could still see those coordinates burned into my mind like they'd been branded there. I could still hear Jennifer's voice, telling me the road never ends. She's right, it doesn't. I drive every day, hauling logs down from the mountains, and every day I pass those turnoffs, those gaps in the trees, those faded wooden posts, and every day I don't take them. But someday I will. I can feel it. Someday the pull will be too strong, or I'll be too tired to resist, or I'll convince myself that I just need to prove it wasn't real. And when that day comes, I'll turn off the highway and onto that road, and I'll drive up into the mountains where the trees are too thick and the fog is too heavy and the silence is too complete. And I won't come back. Not really. Oh, I might make it down the mountain, might even make it home. But the road will come with me, the way it came with Jennifer, the way it comes with all of us. It'll be in my mirrors, in my hallways, in every dark corner and closed door. It'll be waiting for me every time I close my eyes, every time I get behind the wheel. The road is patient. It knows I'm marked, and sooner or later, marked or not, we all end up exactly where we're supposed to be. I just hope I remember to warn the next one. I've always been good at reading people. 17 years behind the wheel of a logging truck teaches you that. You learn to size up dispatchers, foremen, scalers, mill workers, all of them, just from a handshake or the way they look at you when you back your rig up to the loading dock. You learn who's honest, who's cutting corners, who's going to short you on board feet and hope you don't notice. But I never learned how to read cargo, not until that run out of Whistler Creek. My name's Tom Peterson, and I haul timber for Western Forest Products, have been since 2006. I work the Central Oregon routes mostly, running between the small timber operations in the Cascade foothills and the mills down in the valleys. It's decent work if you don't mind the solitude and the long hours. I've always preferred my own company anyway. Wife left me back in 2010, said she couldn't handle being married to someone who was never home. Can't say I blame her. It was mid-November when I got the call about Whistler Creek. I was at a truck stop outside of Sisters, finishing up a mediocre breakfast and going over my logbook when my phone rang. The dispatcher was a woman named Carol, someone I'd worked with maybe twice before. Professional, no nonsense, the kind of person who didn't waste words. "Tom, I've got a pickup for you. Whistler Creek operation, up past Mackenzie Bridge. They've got 42,000 pounds of dug fir that needs to get down to the Weyerhuser mill in Springfield by tomorrow morning." I knew the general area, had driven past the turnoff a few times, but I'd never actually been up to Whistler Creek. It was a small operation, family-owned, the kind of outfit that only cut timber a few months out of the year when the money got tight. "What's the road condition like up there?" I asked. "We had some heavy rain last week. They said it's passable. Might be some mud in spots, but nothing your rig can't handle. They've got the logs all bundled and ready to load. Should be a quick turnaround." I looked at my watch. Just past 9 in the morning. If I left now, I could be up there by noon, loaded by 2, and down to Springfield before dark. Easy run. "What's the rate?" "Standard, plus 50 for the turnaround time." That was fair. "All right, send me the coordinates." My phone buzzed a moment later with the location. I plugged it into my GPS and saw that Whistler Creek was about 43 miles northeast, most of it on Highway 126, then a few miles up a Forest Service road. The GPS estimated an hour and 10 minutes to get there. I finished my coffee, paid my tab, and headed out to my truck. It was a Peterbilt 389, not the newest model, but reliable. And I kept it maintained better than most guys keep their personal vehicles. Dark blue cab, 40-foot flatbed trailer, equipped with all the chains and binders I'd need to secure a timber load. The drive up Highway 126 was pleasant enough. Clear skies, temperature in the low 40s, not much traffic. The Mackenzie River ran parallel to the road for most of the route, swift and gray with snowmelt. I passed through the little town of Mackenzie Bridge, barely more than a gas station and a general store, and kept going. About 5 miles past town, my GPS told me to turn left onto Forest Service Road 2638. The turnoff was easy to miss, just a gravel road disappearing into the trees, marked by a small brown sign that I only saw because I was looking for it. I downshifted and made the turn. The road climbed immediately, winding up through dense stands of Douglas fir and western hemlock. The canopy overhead was thick enough to block out most of the sunlight, giving everything a dim, greenish cast. The road was rough. Potholes and washboard sections that rattled my teeth, but passable like Carol had said. I drove for about 20 minutes, climbing steadily, before I saw the first sign that something was off. There, nailed to a tree at about eye level, was a handmade wooden sign with an arrow pointing up the road. The word painted on it, in crude black letters, was simple: Whistler. Nothing unusual about that except that the paint looked fresh. Really fresh. Like someone had just put it up that morning. And the wood itself was new, not weathered like you'd expect from something that had been out in the elements. I kept driving. A quarter-mile further there was another sign, identical to the first. Fresh paint, new wood, arrow pointing forward. Then another one after that, and another. They were spaced at regular intervals, maybe every 100 yards, like someone was really anxious to make sure I didn't miss the turn. The thing was, there were no other roads. No turnoffs, no forks, nothing. Just this one gravel track climbing up through the forest. The signs were marking a route that couldn't be missed even if you tried. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe the Whistler Creek crew had put them up recently because they had drivers getting lost. Maybe they'd just painted over old signs. There were a dozen logical explanations. But it bothered me anyway. At 11:43 a.m., according to my dashboard clock, I came around a bend and saw the operation. It wasn't much, just a cleared area maybe 2 acres in size, with a small trailer that served as an office, a couple of pieces of equipment parked off to the side, and 3 large bundles of logs laid out and ready for loading. What struck me immediately was how quiet it was. No sounds of saws or machinery, no workers moving around, no trucks except mine. Just silence, and those 3 bundles of logs sitting there in the clearing. I pulled my rig up next to the bundles and killed the engine. Sat there for a minute, looking around. The trailer's door was closed, no lights on inside that I could see. The equipment, a skidder and an old excavator, looked like they hadn't been used in days. There was no fresh sawdust, no diesel smell in the air, none of the normal signs of an active logging site. I climbed down from the cab and walked over to the trailer. The steps up to the door were slick with moisture, and when I knocked, the whole structure shook slightly, cheap and temporary. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. "Hello? Anybody here? I'm with Western Forest Products here for the pickup." Nothing. Not even the sound of movement inside. I tried the door handle. Locked. I cupped my hands against the window and peered inside, but the glass was too dirty to see through clearly. I could make out shapes, a desk, some chairs, filing cabinets, but no people. This was strange, but not unprecedented. Sometimes the crew would finish a cut, bundle the logs, and then head back to town, leaving the pickup for later. They'd been expecting me after all. The logs were here, ready to go. Maybe they'd just decided not to wait around. I walked over to the first bundle to inspect it. The logs looked good. Clean, straight-dug fir, ranging from about 24 to 36 inches in diameter. They were properly bundled with steel cables, the ends marked with orange paint to show they'd been scaled. Everything looked legitimate. I did a walk around of all 3 bundles, checking for rot or damage, making sure the cables were secure. It all looked fine. 42,000 pounds, Carol had said, and from what I could see that seemed about right. The only odd thing, and it was a small thing, probably nothing, was the smell. The logs had a scent to them, which wasn't unusual. Fresh-cut timber always smells like the tree it came from. But this smell was different. Sharper, almost medicinal, like eucalyptus or camphor. I'd never smelled anything quite like it from dug fir before. I walked back to my truck and grabbed my loading gear. I had a portable winch system I could use to drag the bundles onto the flatbed, and enough chains and binders to secure them properly. The whole loading process would take me maybe 90 minutes working alone. I was hooking up the first cable when I heard it. A sound from somewhere in the trees, sharp and clear in the silence. It took me a second to place it, but when I did, my hands stopped moving. It was a whistle, a human whistle. The kind someone does to get your attention. 2 short notes going up in pitch. I straightened up and looked toward the tree line. Hello? Someone there? The whistle came again, from the same direction. Definitely human. Definitely intentional. But I couldn't see anyone. The forest was too thick, the shadows too deep. I'm here for the pickup, I called out. If you're from the Whistler Creek crew, I could use a hand loading. No response this time. Just silence, and then, faintly, I heard footsteps. Someone walking through the underbrush, moving parallel to the clearing. I couldn't see them, but I could hear them clearly. The crack of twigs, the rustle of leaves, the deliberate pace of someone who wasn't trying to be quiet. The footsteps stopped. Everything went silent again. I stood there for a long moment, cable in hand, waiting. My instincts were telling me something was wrong, but my rational mind was dismissing it. This was a logging operation. There were probably workers around, maybe someone taking a break in the woods, maybe someone who didn't speak English well and couldn't respond to my calls. I went back to work, hooked the cable around the first bundle, attached it to my winch, and started the slow process of dragging it up onto the flatbed. The winch motor was loud, drowning out any other sounds, and I focused on the work, watching the bundle slide across the ground and up the ramps. It took about 40 minutes to get the first bundle loaded and secured. I took a water break, leaning against the side of my truck, and that's when I noticed the tire tracks. They were fresh, pressed into the soft earth at the edge of the clearing. Deep tracks, like something heavy had rolled through recently. But they didn't match any of the equipment I could see. They weren't from the skidder or the excavator, and they were too wide to be from a pickup truck. They looked like they came from a semi, a logging truck maybe, with a full load. But there were no other trucks here, just mine. I followed the tracks with my eyes and saw that they led away from the clearing, back down a different road than the one I'd come up on. I hadn't noticed this road before. It was barely visible. Just a gap in the trees, overgrown and little used. The tracks led down that road and disappeared into the forest. I stood there looking at those tracks for longer than I should have. Everything in my body was telling me to get in my truck and leave. Don't load the other 2 bundles, don't wait around, just go. But I'd already loaded 1 bundle. I'd already committed. And besides, I needed the money. Bills don't pay themselves, and work isn't always easy to come by. I loaded the second bundle. It went quicker this time, now that I had the rhythm down. I was securing the chains when I heard the whistle again, but this time it was closer. Much closer. Maybe 20 yards away, just inside the tree line to my left. I stopped what I was doing and turned to look. Hey, I can hear you. If you've got something to say, come out here and say it. The whistle came again, and this time I was certain. It was coming from inside the trees, from a spot where I could see there was nothing but shadows and ferns. No person, no movement, nothing. This isn't funny, I said, though I wasn't sure who I was talking to. I finished securing the second bundle and moved on to the third. The sun was starting to drop toward the western horizon, and the clearing was getting darker, the shadows from the trees stretching longer. I wanted to be done and gone before full dark. As I was winching up the third bundle, my phone rang. I almost didn't hear it over the sound of the motor, but I felt it buzzing in my pocket. I stopped the winch and pulled out the phone. It was Carol, the dispatcher. "Tom, where are you?" The mill called, asking about that Whistler Creek load. I checked my watch, 2:17 p.m. "I'm still up at the site, just finishing the loading now. I'll be on the road in 20 minutes. There was a pause on the other end. "Tom, what site are you talking about?" "Whistler Creek, the job you sent me on this morning." Another pause, longer this time. Tom, I didn't send you to Whistler Creek. We don't have any pickups scheduled there. My stomach went cold. Carol, you called me at 9 this morning. Told me to pick up 42,000 pounds of Doug fir from Whistler Creek and run it down to Springfield. Tom, I didn't call you this morning. I've been in a meeting since 8:30. I just got out 10 minutes ago and saw the mill's message. I pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at the call log. There it was. 9:04 a.m. incoming call from Western Forest Products Dispatch. Duration 4 minutes and 12 seconds. I have the call right here in my log, I said. You called me. You sent me coordinates. I'm looking at our system right now, Carol said, and I could hear the clicking of a keyboard in the background. There's no record of any call to you today, and there's definitely no pickup scheduled for Whistler Creek. That operation hasn't been active in 2 years. The phone almost slipped from my hand. What? Whistler Creek Timber shut down in 2021. The owner died, and his kids sold off the equipment. The land went back to the Forest Service. There's nothing up there anymore, Tom. I looked around the clearing. At the trailer, the skidder, the excavator, at the 3 bundles of logs, 2 of them already on my truck. Carol, I'm standing in the clearing right now. There's equipment here. There are logs. That's impossible. I know for a fact that... She stopped. Tom, where exactly are you? I told her the coordinates for my GPS. Jesus Christ, she said quietly. Tom, you need to get out of there right now. What are you talking about? Those coordinates, Tom, that's not the Whistler Creek operation. That's 5 miles north of where Whistler Creek used to be. That area was closed off by the Forest Service 3 years ago. There was an accident. People died. My mouth went dry. What kind of accident? A loading accident. A cable snapped while they were loading a truck, and the whole bundle came down on the driver, crushed the cab. They never found all of him, just pieces. I looked at the 3rd bundle, still on the ground, the cable wrapped around it. They shut down the whole area after that, Carol continued. Declared it unsafe. Nobody's supposed to be logging up there. If there's equipment and timber, it's illegal. Poachers, maybe, or what? Just get out of there, Tom. Unload whatever you've got and drive back down. I'll sort this out with the office. I wanted to do exactly that, but I looked at the 2 bundles already secured to my flatbed and thought about the time I'd spent loading them, the effort. And I thought about the money. Even if this was a mistake, even if the job was wrong somehow, the timber was real. I could see it, touch it. 42,000 pounds of good Doug fir, worth thousands of dollars. I've already got 2 bundles loaded, I said. I'm going to finish the 3rd and bring them down. We can figure out where they're supposed to go once I'm back at the mill. Tom, I'll be fine, Carol. I'll be on the road in 15 minutes. I hung up before she could argue further and pocketed my phone, grabbed the cable and hooked it around the 3rd bundle. Started the winch. The bundle was heavier than the other 2. I could tell from the way the cable strained, from the sound the winch motor made as it pulled. The bundle scraped across the ground slowly, reluctantly, like it didn't want to move. I was about halfway through the loading when the whistle came again. This time it was right behind me. I spun around, and there was nothing there. Just my truck, the clearing, the trees beyond. But the whistle had been close. So close, I should have been able to reach out and touch whoever made it. Who's there? My voice came out harder than I intended, aggressive, covering fear with anger. No response, just the whine of the winch motor and the scrape of logs on gravel. I turned back to the winch controls, and that's when I saw him. A man, standing at the edge of the clearing, maybe 30 feet away. He was wearing old-style loggers' clothes, suspenders, heavy boots, a faded flannel shirt. He was just standing there, not moving, watching me. "Hey!" I called out. "You work here?" The man didn't respond, didn't move. He just stood there. And in the failing light, I couldn't make out his face clearly. He seemed blurred somehow, like I was looking at him through dirty glass. "I'm finishing up this load," I said. "If there's a problem, you need to tell me now." The man raised one arm slowly and pointed, not at me, but at the bundle I was loading. He held his arm there for a long moment, pointing, and then he lowered it and turned away, started walking back into the trees. "Wait." I started after him, but he moved fast, faster than anyone should be able to move through thick underbrush. Within seconds, he disappeared completely into the shadows. I stood at the edge of the clearing, breathing hard, my heart pounding. The rational part of my brain was offering explanations. A squatter, a Forest Service ranger, a poacher checking out the site. But none of those explanations felt right. I went back to the winch and finished loading the third bundle. Got it secured with chains and binders, everything tight and legal. The whole time I worked, I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see that man again. But the clearing stayed empty. It was 3:47 p.m. when I finally climbed back into my cab and started the engine. The sun was low on the horizon, and the shadows had stretched to cover most of the clearing. I put the truck in gear and pulled out, following my tire tracks back toward the main road. I'd gone maybe half a mile when I checked my rearview mirror and saw something that made my breath catch. The clearing was still visible behind me, and there, standing in the center of it, was a figure. The same man, I thought, though at this distance I couldn't be sure. He was just standing there, watching me leave. I faced forward and kept driving, faster than I should have on that rough road, bouncing over potholes, the loaded trailer swaying behind me. I didn't look back again. The GPS told me to turn right when I reached the main Forest Service road, which would take me back toward Highway 126. But when I got to the intersection, I saw something that confused me. The road to the right, the one I'd come up on, looked different. The gravel was darker, the ruts deeper, and the trees seemed to press closer to the edges. I sat at the intersection for a moment, idling, trying to remember if it had looked like this on the way up. I couldn't recall. I'd been focused on finding the site, not on memorizing the road conditions. I turned right and started down. The road was rougher than I remembered, more washed out, with sections where water had carved deep channels across the gravel. I had to slow to a crawl in places, navigating carefully to keep my loaded trailer from sliding into the ditch. After about 10 minutes, I realized I should have reached Highway 126 by now. The GPS said I was close, less than a mile, but I was still deep in the forest, no sign of the paved road anywhere. I checked the GPS again and saw something odd. The blue line showing my route had developed a kink in it, like the road had bent or shifted somehow. The highway was still ahead of me, according to the display, but the distance kept changing. First it said 0.7 miles, then 1.2, then 0.9. The numbers flickered and jumped like the GPS couldn't quite figure out where I was. I kept driving. What else could I do? The road ahead was the only way forward. Behind me was just the way back to that clearing, and I wasn't going back there for anything. The forest was getting darker, even though sunset was still at least an hour away. The canopy overhead had gotten thicker somehow, blocking out more light. My headlights were on, cutting pale beams through the gloom, and I could see moisture in the air, a fine mist that made everything look soft and indistinct. I rounded a curve and nearly hit them. 4 deer, standing in the middle of the road, not moving. I slammed on the brakes, and the truck shuddered to a stop maybe 10 feet from the nearest one. The deer didn't run. They just stood there, all 4 of them, facing my truck. staring at me with dark, reflective eyes. I tapped the horn, expecting them to bolt. Nothing. They didn't even flinch, just kept staring. I laid on the horn, a long blast that echoed through the forest. The deer stood motionless. "What the hell?" I muttered, and put the truck in neutral. Opened my door and climbed down. Maybe if I walked toward them, they'd spook. I'd taken maybe 3 steps when all 4 deer turned in perfect unison and walked, not ran, walked, off the road and into the trees. Slow, measured steps like they were in no hurry, like they were just choosing to leave, not because they were afraid, but because they were done watching. I stood there in the road, the mist settling on my shoulders, and watched them disappear into the shadows. Something about the way they'd moved, the synchronized turning, the unhurried pace, it felt wrong. Deer didn't act like that. I climbed back into the cab and kept driving. The road descended gradually, winding back and forth through the trees. I should have been getting closer to the highway, should have been able to hear traffic sounds or see lights through the trees, but there was nothing. Just forest, endless and dark. My CB radio crackled to life, making me jump. Static at first, then a voice, faint and distorted. "Load, followed." I grabbed the handset. "Say again? You're breaking up." More static, then clearer. "Shouldn't have taken the load. It followed you." My hands tightened on the wheel. "Who is this? Identify yourself." The voice came back, a man's voice, rough and urgent. "The timber. You shouldn't have loaded it. It's been waiting. Now it's with you." "What are you talking about? Who are you?" "Turn around," the voice said. "Look at your load." Every instinct told me not to, but I glanced at my passenger side mirror anyway. The mirror showed the trailer behind me, the bundles secured with chains, everything normal. Except, was the third bundle different? The one I'd loaded last? In the mirror, it looked darker than the other 2, the logs appearing almost black instead of the warm brown of fresh-cut timber. And was there something on top of it? A shape? Dark and irregular. I looked away from the mirror back to the road. "There's nothing wrong with my load, it's just timber." "It was timber," the voice said. 3 years ago, before the accident, before the blood soaked into it, before it sat there, waiting. I was gripping the handset so hard my knuckles were white. "You're not making sense. The driver who died, they didn't bury all of him. Couldn't find all the pieces. Some of it stayed with the load, became part of it." "That's insane." "Check your load," the voice said again. "Really look at it, you'll see." The radio went dead. I tried calling out, cycling through channels, but got nothing. Just silence. I told myself it was a prank. Someone messing with truckers on the CB, trying to scare them. It happened sometimes, bored locals or kids with too much time. I wasn't going to fall for it. But I couldn't stop thinking about that third bundle, about how heavy it had been, about the smell, that sharp medicinal scent, about the man in the clearing pointing at it. I drove for another 15 minutes before I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know, had to look. I found a wide spot in the road and pulled over. Killed the engine but left my work lights on, flooding the trailer with harsh white light. Grabbed my flashlight and climbed down from the cab. The mist was thicker now, swirling around my legs as I walked back to the trailer. I could hear water dripping from the trees, the sound of my own breathing. Nothing else. The forest was completely silent. I walked along the passenger side of the trailer, inspecting each bundle. The first 2 looked fine. Good timber, properly secured, nothing unusual. I came to the third bundle and stopped. It looked the same as the others. Same size, same cables, same orange marks on the ends. But up close I could see what I'd noticed in the mirror. The wood was darker. Not black exactly, but a deep reddish brown, like mahogany or cherry. And that smell was stronger here, that medicinal, wrong smell. I raised my flashlight and examined the bundle more closely. The individual logs looked normal enough, but between them, in the gaps where the rounds didn't quite meet, I could see something. Something dark and fibrous, like moss or lichen, growing in the spaces. I reached out to touch it, and my hand stopped halfway. Every fiber of my being was screaming not to touch that bundle, not to make contact with whatever was growing there. I pulled my hand back and stepped away. It was just decay. Old timber that had sat too long before being bundled. That's all it was. Nothing sinister, nothing wrong, just wood that had started to rot. I was turning to walk back to the cab when I heard it. A sound from the bundle behind me. A wet, sliding sound, like something shifting inside the logs. I spun around, flashlight up. The bundle looked the same. Nothing had moved. But I'd heard it clearly, I was certain. I stood there for a long moment, waiting for the sound to come again. When it didn't, I walked quickly back to the cab and climbed in. Locked the doors, stupid, I know. What was I locking out? And started the engine. I pulled back onto the road and kept driving. The GPS still couldn't decide where I was or how far it was to the highway. The numbers kept changing. The blue line kept kinking and straightening. I gave up watching it and just focused on the road ahead. At some point, I'm not sure when, I realized I'd been driving for over an hour since leaving the clearing. At the speed I was going, I should have covered at least 20 miles, should have hit the highway long ago. But I was still on this narrow forest service road, still surrounded by trees, still alone. The mist had turned to light rain, speckling my windshield. I turned on the wipers and they scraped across the glass with a rhythmic squeak. The sound was almost hypnotic, and I had to shake my head to stay alert. I checked my rearview mirror, just a routine glance, and saw something that made my heart stop. There was someone sitting on top of the third bundle. I slammed on the brakes and the truck skidded to a stop. I stared at the mirror, breathing hard. The figure was still there. A man, I thought, though it was hard to tell in the darkness and rain. He was sitting cross-legged on top of the bundle, facing forward, toward the cab, toward me. I grabbed my flashlight and kicked open my door, jumped down from the cab and ran back to the trailer, ready to yell at whoever thought it was funny to hitch a ride on my load. But when I got there, there was no one. The bundle was empty. Just logs and chains and that dark, fibrous growth between the rounds. No person, no sign that anyone had been there. I walked around the entire trailer, checking every side, shining my light into the shadows. Nothing. I looked up at the top of the bundle, at the exact spot where I'd seen the figure sitting. There, in the wet wood, I could see what looked like handprints. 2 of them, side by side, pressed into the surface of the logs like someone had been gripping them. But they couldn't be handprints. They were too large, the fingers too long, and they were indented into wood that was hard as stone, impossible to mark without tools. I backed away from the trailer and returned to the cab. My hands were shaking as I put the truck in gear. I didn't look at the mirrors anymore, didn't want to see what might be there. I just drove. The rain got heavier. The road got worse. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice was whispering that I wasn't going to make it out of these woods. That this road didn't lead anywhere anymore. That I'd made a mistake taking that load, and now I was going to pay for it. I told that voice to shut up and kept driving. I don't know when I started hearing the knocking. It was so subtle at first, so easy to dismiss as just the normal sounds a loaded truck makes. Chains settling, logs shifting, the trailer flexing over rough road. But gradually, I became aware that the knocking had a pattern to it. 3 knocks, pause. 3 knocks, pause. 3 knocks, pause. It was coming from the back of the trailer. from the load. I turned up the radio, trying to drown it out. Found a classic rock station, turned it up loud until the cab was filled with guitar riffs and drums. But I could still hear it, underneath the music, persistent and rhythmic. Knock, knock, knock. Pause, knock, 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 pause. My phone rang, and I nearly drove off the road. I fumbled it out of my pocket and answered without checking the caller ID. "Tom, thank God, where are you?" It was Carol. "I don't know," I said, and I hated how my voice shook. "I've been driving for 2 hours. I should be at the highway by now, but I'm still in the forest." 2 hours? Tom, that's impossible. It's a 40-minute drive from those coordinates to Highway 126. I know that, but I'm telling you, I've been driving for 2 hours, and I'm still on this goddamn Forest Service road. There was silence on the other end. Then, "Tom, are you okay? You sound—" "I'm fine. I just need to get out of these woods. Listen to me carefully. I made some calls. That area you're in, it's been restricted since the accident. But I found someone who used to work up there before it happened. He told me, Tom, there are stories about that timber." "Stories?" "The logs that crushed the driver. They were left there after the accident. Nobody wanted to touch them. Too much bad luck, you know. They sat there for months before the Forest Service finally came in and cleared the site. But this guy, he says some of the timber went missing before they got there. A few bundles just gone. And ever since then, drivers have reported—" She paused. "Reported what?" "Strange things. Seeing figures in their mirrors, hearing sounds from their loads. Some of them never made it down. They'd leave the site with a full load and just disappear. They'd find the trucks days later, empty. The timber gone, the driver gone, just empty trucks on the side of the road." The knocking got louder. 3 heavy blows that rattled the whole trailer. "I can hear it," I said. "There's something in my load. Get rid of it, Tom. Pull over and cut those chains. Drop the load right there and get out. I can't just abandon 42,000 pounds of timber in the middle of the forest. It's not timber anymore, don't you understand? That wood soaked up blood and death. It's been sitting there, waiting for someone to come along and take it. And now it's got you." The knocking stopped suddenly. The silence was almost worse. "Tom, are you still there?" "Yeah, I'm here." "Drop the load. Do it now, while you still can." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I looked at my fuel gauge and saw that I was down to a quarter tank. If I dropped the load and it turned out to be nothing, just my imagination, just stress and exhaustion playing tricks, I'd lose my job. Western Forest Products didn't take kindly to drivers who abandoned loads in the middle of nowhere. "I'm almost out of fuel," I said. "I need to find the highway, find a station." "Tom, I'll be fine. I just need to get out of these woods." I hung up before she could argue. Immediately, my phone buzzed with a text message. From Carol. "Please drop the load." I put the phone on the passenger seat and focused on driving. The rain was coming down harder now, heavy drops that hammered against the windshield faster than my wipers could clear them. The road was getting muddier, the truck sliding in places, and I had to fight the wheel to keep it straight. I came around a curve and saw lights ahead. Finally, civilization, or at least a building. As I got closer, I could see it was a small ranger station, dark and closed for the night, but with a single light over the door. And next to it, miracle of miracles, there was a fuel pump. I pulled in and stopped, leaving the engine running while I checked the pump. It was old, manual, the kind you almost never see anymore. There was a handwritten sign taped to it. Emergency use only. Leave payment in box. I didn't care. I grabbed my wallet, found $40 in cash and stuffed it in the payment box. Started pumping fuel into my tank. While the diesel flowed, I walked around my truck checking the load one more time. Everything looked secure. The chains were tight. The bundles weren't shifting. But that third bundle, the dark one, it seemed to have gotten darker. The reddish-brown color had deepened to almost black, and that fibrous growth had spread, covering more of the exposed wood. I finished fueling and was walking back to the cab when I heard a voice. "You shouldn't have taken that load." I spun around. There, standing at the edge of the light, was the man from the clearing. Same clothes. Same stance, but closer now. Close enough that I could see his face, or I should have been able to see his face, but where his features should have been, there was just a blur, like someone had smeared the image. I couldn't focus on it. Couldn't make out eyes or nose or mouth. Just a suggestion of a face, indistinct and wrong. "Who are you?" I asked, though I thought I knew. "You took what's mine," the man said, and his voice was strange, layered, like multiple people speaking at once. 3 years I've been waiting. 3 years that timber's been seasoning, and now it's ready. Ready for what? To go home. To finish the journey." He took a step toward me, and I backed up against the side of my truck. "Stay away from me." "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "I don't need to." "You'll take me where I need to go. Where we need to go, all of us. All of you." He gestured toward my trailer. "We're all in the timber. All of us who died in these woods. The loggers, the drivers, the lost ones. The wood remembers. It soaks us up, holds us in, and when someone takes it out of the forest, we go too." I looked at the third bundle and saw them now. Faces pressing out from between the logs. Not clearly, just impressions, like shapes pushing against a membrane. Dozens of them, maybe more, all trying to get out. "I'm cutting the chains," I said. "I'm dropping this load right here." "You can't," the man said. "It's already part of your truck now, part of you. Look." I looked down at my hands and saw that they were stained. Dark, reddish-brown, like the timber. And when I tried to raise them to my face, they moved slowly, reluctantly, like they didn't want to obey me anymore. "No," I said. "No, this isn't real." "You'll drive," the man said, and his voice was fading now, getting quieter. "You'll take us out of these woods, down to the valleys, to the cities. And when you get there, when you deliver the load, we'll spread. Into the houses, the buildings, the foundations. We'll be everywhere, and more will join us. The wood always needs more." I closed my eyes, counted to 10, and opened them again. The man was gone. My hands were clean. The faces in the timber were gone, if they'd ever been there. I was alone in the rain, standing next to my truck at an abandoned ranger station in the middle of the forest. I climbed back into the cab, locked the doors, and put the truck in gear. I didn't know if any of that had been real, or if I was losing my mind from stress and exhaustion. I didn't care anymore. I just needed to get to the highway, get to the mill, deliver this cursed load, and never think about it again. The GPS flickered to life and showed the highway clearly now, just 3 miles ahead. I followed the blue line, driving carefully through the rain, and 15 minutes later, I saw pavement ahead. Real pavement, with lane markers and a sign indicating Highway 126. I almost cried with relief. I pulled onto the highway and headed west, toward Springfield, toward the mill, toward the end of this nightmare. There was more traffic here, normal cars and trucks driving at normal speeds in the rain. I merged into the flow and felt some of the tension drain out of me. It was over. I'd made it. Except I kept checking my mirrors, kept seeing shapes on the load that weren't there when I looked directly, kept hearing very faintly under the sound of the engine and the rain that rhythmic knocking. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. It followed me all the way to Springfield. The Weyerhaeuser mill in Springfield runs 24 hours, with lights blazing all night long. I pulled into the yard at 11:37 p.m., almost 10 hours after I'd left that clearing in the woods. The guard at the gate checked my paperwork, gave me a weird look when he saw the load wasn't on his schedule, and waved me through to the unloading area. There were 3 other trucks already waiting, and I pulled in behind them. Killed the engine, filled out my logbook, and sat there in the silence. The knocking had stopped. Sometime during the drive down the highway it had just ceased, and the load had been quiet for the last hour. I told myself that was a good sign. A foreman came out of the mill office, a big guy in a reflective vest named Dale, who I'd worked with before. He walked up to my window, and I rolled it down. "Tom, hell of a night to be hauling." He looked back at my load. "This the Whistler Creek timber? You're expecting it. Got a call a couple hours ago to watch for you. Some kind of rush job?" He was walking back to the trailer now, clipboard in hand, inspecting the bundles. I climbed down and followed him. "You'll want to be careful with that 3rd bundle," I said. It might be compromised. Looks like some rot got into it." Dale shined his flashlight on the 3rd bundle and frowned. "Doesn't look rotten to me. Looks like prime Doug fir. Little dark, maybe, but that's probably just the rain." I looked at the bundle. In the harsh lights of the mill yard, it looked normal. Just timber, no different from the other 2. The dark, fibrous growth I'd seen was gone. The reddish-brown color had faded back to normal wood. I could have sworn, I started, but trailed off. Dale gave me a concerned look. "You okay, Tom? You look rough." "Just a long day. How long till you can unload me?" "We'll get you processed in about 20 minutes. Go grab some coffee in the break room. Warm up." I wanted to stay with my truck, wanted to watch them unload the timber. But I was exhausted, running on fumes, and the thought of hot coffee was too tempting. I headed into the mill office and found the break room. The coffee was old and bitter, but it was hot, and I drank 2 cups while staring at a muted TV on the wall. A late-night talk show, the host interviewing some actor I didn't recognize. Normal, mundane, safe. I was halfway through my 3rd cup when I heard the sound. A crash, loud enough to shake the walls of the office. I jumped up and ran outside. In the unloading area, my truck was surrounded by workers and machinery. The first 2 bundles had been removed and were sitting on the ground. But the 3rd bundle, the dark one, was still on the trailer. And something had gone wrong. The crane they'd been using to lift it had stopped. The operator was climbing down from the cab, shaking his head. I ran over to Dale. "What happened?" "Cable snapped," he said, pointing. "Right in the middle of the lift. Never seen anything like it. That's a brand new cable, rated for 60,000 pounds. Should have handled this load easy." I looked at the broken cable. The end was frayed, the steel strands separated. But they weren't just separated. They looked melted, almost like something had burned through them. "We'll have to get another cable. Hook it up again. Going to be a few more minutes." I watched as they brought in a new cable, thicker than the first. They hooked it around the bundle, and the crane operator climbed back into his cab, started the lift. The cable went taut. The bundle began to rise, and then, with a sound like a gunshot, the cable snapped again. This time, I saw it happen. The cable didn't fray or wear through. It just separated, right in the middle, like an invisible blade had sliced through it. The bundle crashed back onto the trailer, and the whole truck rocked with the impact. Workers scattered, and Dale was on his radio immediately calling for maintenance. "This doesn't make sense," he said. 2 cables, both brand new, both failed. "There's something wrong with that bundle." "Don't use the crane," I said. "Use the forks. Slide it off." Dale looked skeptical, but he gave the order. A forklift came over, massive tines extending, and the operator carefully worked them under the bundle. Started to lift. The forklift's engine revved higher, straining. The bundle wasn't coming off the trailer. The operator tried again, giving it more power, and I could see the forklift's rear wheels starting to lift off the ground from the weight. "How heavy is that thing?" Dale asked, checking his clipboard. "Says here it should be about 14,000 pounds. That forklift should handle that easy." The operator gave up and backed away. Dale walked over to the bundle and put his hand on one of the logs. Then he jerked his hand back like he'd been burned. "Jesus, Tom, feel this." I didn't want to, but I reached out and touched the timber. It was warm, not just warm, hot, like it had been sitting in the sun all day, even though it was raining and cold in the middle of the night. "What the hell kind of wood is this?" Dale asked. Before I could answer, one of the other workers called out, "Hey, Dale, you need to see this." We walked over to where the man was standing, on the other side of the bundle. He was pointing at something between the logs. It was a hand, a human hand, fingers curled, pressed between two of the logs like it had been caught there. Dale pulled out his flashlight and shined it into the gap. The hand was attached to an arm, which disappeared deeper into the bundle. He couldn't see how far it went. "Oh my God," Dale said quietly. "There's someone in there." He pulled out his radio and started calling for help, for an ambulance, for police. Workers were gathering now, everyone staring at the hand, and I heard someone say they could see something else, deeper in the bundle. Another hand, maybe a face. I backed away slowly. No one was looking at me. They were all focused on the bundle, on trying to figure out how to get it apart, how to get whoever was inside out. I got in my truck, started the engine, unhooked the trailer from the cab, just popped the kingpin and left it sitting there in the yard. Dale saw me as I was pulling away. He ran after my truck yelling, but I didn't stop. I drove out of the mill yard, through the gate, onto the highway. The guard tried to wave me down, but I kept going. I drove straight home to my apartment in Eugene. Parked my cab in the street, went inside, and locked every door and window. Checked all the rooms, turned on all the lights. I tried to sleep but couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that hand. Saw those faces pressing out from between the logs. Heard that knocking, that patient, persistent knocking. At dawn, I got a call from Western Forest Products. It was the owner himself, not Carol. He told me I was suspended, pending an investigation into what they'd found in my load. He asked if I had any explanation for how 4 bodies had ended up bundled in with the timber. 4 bodies. Not 1. 4. I told him I didn't know anything about it and hung up. I haven't left my apartment in 3 days. I sit here, curtains drawn, lights on, and I listen. Because at night, when it's quiet, I can hear it. Faint, distant, but definitely there. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. It's not coming from outside. It's coming from inside the walls, from the floor, from the ceiling. The wood in this building, the beams and studs and joists, all of it came from somewhere. Came from some forest, some mill, some operation like Whistler Creek. And now I wonder how much of it is occupied. How many lost souls are pressed into the framework of houses and buildings all over this state, this country, waiting, knocking, trying to be let out. My phone rings sometimes, and when I answer, there's just breathing on the other end. Heavy, wet breathing, like someone with lungs full of sap. Carol stopped calling after the second day. Western Forest Products sent me a certified letter terminating my employment. I haven't opened it. Yesterday I noticed that the hardwood floor in my living room has developed a stain. A dark, reddish-brown stain, roughly the shape of a handprint. I tried to scrub it out, but it's soaked in deep, part of the wood now. This morning, there were 2 handprints. I don't know what to do. I can't stay here, but I can't leave either, because the knocking follows. It's not tied to the load anymore, or to that timber, or to that forest. It's tied to me. I took the load. I brought it down from the mountains. I delivered it, or tried to. And now, somehow, I'm part of it. Part of the timber's journey. Part of its purpose. Dale called me once, 3 days after the delivery. He asked if I knew that all 4 bodies they'd found in the bundle had been identified. 3 of them were loggers who'd gone missing in that area over the last 10 years. The 4th was a trucker named Michael Patterson, who disappeared on a run to Whistler Creek in 2021, the same year of the accident. Dale asked if I'd ever met Patterson. I said no, but I was lying. I had met him once at a truck stop outside of Bend. We'd had coffee together, talked about routes and loads, and the best roads through the Cascades. He'd seemed like a good guy, normal, solid. I wonder if he started hearing the knocking too. I wonder if he saw the faces in his mirrors, felt the timber warming under his hands. I wonder if he tried to drop the load, or if he made it all the way to the mill. I wonder where his truck is now, and whether someone else is driving it, hauling loads up and down the mountains, never knowing what rode with him that last time. The knocking is getting louder now, more insistent. And sometimes when I look at my hands in the right light, I can see the stain there too. Just faint, just a trace, but definitely there. I'm part of the timber now, part of the load. And loads don't stay in one place. They get delivered, they get distributed. They become part of something larger, something growing, something that spreads through the framework of civilization one bundle at a time. I should warn people, should tell every trucker I know not to take jobs from Whistler Creek, or from any of the other closed operations scattered through these mountains. Should tell them that some timber is better left in the woods, rotting back into the soil, rather than brought down into the world. But I won't, because here's the truth I've learned. We all take the load. We all see the money, the opportunity, the routine job that seems too ordinary to be dangerous. We all ignore the warnings, the signs, the voices telling us to turn back. And then we spend the rest of our lives wondering what we brought down with us. The sun is setting now. In a few hours, it'll be dark, and the knocking will get louder. Loud enough that my neighbors will hear it, maybe. Loud enough that someone will call the landlord, or the police. And then what? I've thought about leaving. Just walking away from this apartment, this city, this state. Starting over somewhere else, somewhere far from forests and timber, and the roads that wind through the mountains. But I know it wouldn't matter. The load follows. It always follows. There's a stretch of forest in the western Cascades that doesn't appear on most maps. Oh, the land is there. You can see it on satellite images, a dark green expanse between Highway 22 and the Detroit Lake Reservoir. But if you look at the official Forest Service maps, the logging company maps, even the old surveyor's charts from the 1950s, that section is always blank. No roads marked, no parcels designated, no ownership listed, just empty space, like someone deliberately left it out. My name is Daniel Foster, and I've been hauling timber out of Oregon forests for 22 years. I know these mountains better than most people know their own backyards. I know which roads wash out in spring, which bridges can't handle a full load, which operations are run by people who cut corners, and which ones do things right. And I know, or I thought I knew, every active logging site within 200 miles of Salem. But I'd never heard of the Coldwater Creek operation until Marcus Verne called me on a gray morning in late September. Marcus ran a small brokerage firm that connected independent truckers like me with logging outfits that needed hauling. He was honest, paid on time, and never sent you somewhere that would get your truck destroyed. We'd worked together for maybe 8 years and I trusted him. "Dan," he said when I answered, "I've got something unusual for you. Good money, but it's a strange setup." I was at home, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, looking out at the rain. Work had been slow the past few weeks. How strange. There's an operation up past Detroit in the backcountry. Small crew, family run. They've been cutting on private land. Got about 60,000 pounds of old-growth cedar they need brought down to a specialty mill in Corvallis. Old-growth cedar? Who has rights to cut old growth these days? That's the thing. It's private land. Been in the same family for over 100 years. Completely legal. They've got all the permits, but the family wants it done quiet. No publicity, no Forest Service observers, just a quick cut and haul. I took a sip of coffee. Why? Didn't say, but they're offering double the normal rate for a cedar haul. Cash on delivery. You interested? Double rate was hard to turn down, especially with bills piling up and winter coming. What's the catch? No catch that I know of, just a remote location, and they want it done this week. Today or tomorrow, preferably. Send me the details. My phone buzzed a minute later with a text containing coordinates and a contact name. Raymond Coldwater. I plugged the coordinates into my GPS and frowned. The location was deep in the forest, at least 15 miles from the nearest paved road, in an area I didn't recognize. I called Marcus back. "These coordinates, there's no road shown to get there. Raymond says there's an old logging road that branches off Forest Service Road 46. It's not maintained, but it's passable. He'll meet you at the turnoff at 2 this afternoon to guide you in." Something about this felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on what. The money was good, the setup was legal, and I'd driven worse roads than an unmaintained forest track. All right, I'll be there. I spent the morning getting my rig ready. A Kenworth T800 with a 48-foot flatbed trailer. Checked the fluids, the tires, the chains, and binders I'd need to secure a load of cedar. Cedar is lighter than fir or pine, but old-growth logs can be massive, and I wanted to be prepared. At noon, I headed out. The drive to Forest Service Road 46 took about 90 minutes, winding up through the foothills east of Salem, past the town of Detroit, and into increasingly remote territory. The rain had stopped, but the sky stayed gray and heavy, pressing down on the treetops. Forest Service Road 46 was a decent gravel track, well maintained for the first few miles. I followed it north, watching my GPS as I approached the coordinates Marcus had sent. At exactly 2 o'clock, I saw a pickup truck parked on the side of the road ahead. An old Ford F-250, rust red, with a man standing beside it. I pulled up and stopped. The man walked over as I climbed down from my cab. He was maybe 60, tall and lean, with a weathered face and pale blue eyes that seemed to look right through you. He was wearing work clothes, canvas pants, a flannel shirt, heavy boots, all of it old but well maintained. "Daniel Foster?" His voice was quiet, but it carried. "That's me. You Raymond Coldwater?" He nodded. "Thanks for coming on short notice. The road to the site is about 3 miles in." He gestured toward a gap in the trees I hadn't noticed before. "Follow me. Take it slow. There are some rough patches." I looked at the gap. It barely qualified as a road, more like a trail. 2 ruts in the dirt with grass growing between them. "My rig's going to fit through there?" "It will. I measured. Just keep your wheels in the ruts and you'll be fine. He climbed back into his truck and started forward. I followed, wincing as branches scraped along both sides of my cab. The trail, I couldn't call it a road, wound through dense forest, climbing gradually. The trees here were enormous, old-growth Douglas fir and cedar that blocked out most of the remaining daylight. We drove for maybe 20 minutes before the trail opened into a clearing. It wasn't large, maybe an acre, but it had been logged recently. I could see stumps, fresh sawdust, and 3 massive cedar logs laid out and ready for loading. A small excavator sat off to one side, along with a portable mill and some other equipment. But what caught my attention was the forest beyond the clearing. The trees there were different from anything I'd seen in Oregon. They were cedar, but huge, 60, 70 feet to the first branches, trunks so wide you could drive a car through them. And they were old, really old. The bark was almost black with age, and moss hung from the branches in long, gray curtains. Raymond parked his truck and got out. I pulled my rig up next to the logs and killed the engine. When I stepped down, the first thing I noticed was the silence. No birds, no wind in the trees, no distant sound of traffic or machinery. Just absolute quiet. "Hell of a stand of cedar you've got here," I said, walking over to the logs. They were beautiful. Straight-grained, no knots, the wood a deep reddish brown. Each log was maybe 4 feet in diameter and 40 feet long. Premium timber, the kind that would fetch top dollar at a specialty mill. "Been in my family since 1887, Raymond said. "My great-great-grandfather bought this land from the government. 240 acres, most of it like what you see." He gestured toward the old-growth forest. "You've never logged it before?" "No, family rule. The trees stay standing. But I'm the last of the Coldwaters, and I'm getting old. No kids, no heirs. When I'm gone, this land goes back to the Forest Service, and they'll probably turn it into a preserve. So I figured I'd take a few trees now, while I still can. Just these 3, that's all." I walked along the first log, examining it. "These are some of the finest cedar logs I've ever seen. You could get more money if you took more trees. I don't need more money. I need these 3 out of here, that's all." There was something in his tone that discouraged further questions. I pulled out my tape measure and started calculating board feet, estimating weight. The 3 logs together would be right around 60,000 pounds, just like Marcus had said. "I can have you loaded in about 2 hours, I said. "Road conditions permitting, I should have these down to Corvallis by midnight." Raymond nodded. "I'll help you load. Got a winch system set up on the excavator." We worked through the afternoon, using the excavator to lift each log onto my flatbed. Raymond knew what he was doing. He had the rigging set up perfectly, and the logs went on smooth and easy. By 4:30, all 3 were loaded and secured with chains. I was doing a final check of the binders when Raymond walked over and handed me an envelope. "Payment," he said. "Count it if you want." I opened the envelope and found $3,200 bills. Exactly what Marcus had quoted. "This is fine. There's one more thing." Raymond reached into his truck and pulled out a small wooden box, maybe 6 inches square. "I need you to take this too. Deliver it to the mill along with the logs." I took the box. It was surprisingly heavy for its size, and when I shook it gently, something inside shifted with a soft sliding sound. "What is it?" "Just something that needs to go with the cedar. Important to me. You'll make sure it gets there?" "Sure, no problem." He held my gaze for a long moment. "Don't open it, and don't lose it. It's part of the load, needs to stay with the logs." "I won't open it." I set the box on the passenger seat of my cab. Raymond walked with me back to the driver's door. "One other thing. When you leave here, don't stop. Don't pull over, don't turn around, Don't get out of your truck until you're back on the paved road. You understand?" I gave him a strange look. "Why?" "Just do what I'm telling you. Drive straight out. Don't stop. It's important." "All right, if you say so." I climbed into the cab and started the engine. Raymond stepped back and raised one hand in farewell. I put the truck in gear and headed back down the trail, my loaded flatbed swaying slightly as I navigated the ruts. I'd gone maybe half a mile when I noticed the trees. They were watching me. I know how that sounds, but I can't describe it any other way. The massive cedars on both sides of the trail seemed to be leaning in, their branches reaching toward my truck. It was probably just the angle, just the way the light was hitting them, but it felt intentional, like they were aware of me passing. I kept my eyes on the trail ahead and my hands on the wheel. The trailer behind me was heavy, making the truck harder to control on the rough ground. I had to focus on driving. Couldn't afford to get distracted by stupid thoughts about trees watching me. The light was fading now, the forest getting darker. My headlights cut pale beams through the gloom, illuminating maybe 30 feet ahead. The trail seemed longer than I remembered, more winding. I checked my odometer. I'd gone almost 2 miles, which meant I should be close to the main forest road, but the trail kept going, winding deeper into the trees. At 3 miles, I started to worry. At 3.5, I was sure I'd missed a turn somehow, gotten onto a different trail. But there had been no turnoffs, no forks, just this one path through the forest. I thought about Raymond's warning, "Don't stop." But if I kept going and this trail led nowhere, I'd be stuck deep in the woods with 60,000 pounds of cedar and no way to turn around. I slowed down, trying to decide what to do. That's when I saw the sign. It was nailed to a tree on my right, about 8 feet up. A wooden sign, hand-painted, with a single word in red letters, "Stop." I stopped, put the truck in neutral and sat there, engine idling, looking at that sign. It was new. The wood was fresh, the paint still bright. Someone had put it up recently. Maybe today. Maybe while I was loading. I looked ahead down the trail and saw another sign, maybe 50 yards further. Same size, same style, but with a different word. "Go back." My heart started beating faster. This was wrong. All of this was wrong. I should never have taken this job. I grabbed my phone to call Marcus, to call Raymond, to call anyone. No signal. Of course there was no signal. I was too deep in the forest, too far from any tower. I put the truck in reverse and started backing up, carefully watching my mirrors. The trail was too narrow to turn around, but I could back out the way I'd come. All the way to the clearing if I had to. Get Raymond, ask him what the hell was going on. I'd backed maybe 20 yards when something hit my trailer. A heavy impact, like I'd struck a tree or a boulder. I stopped and checked my mirrors. Nothing there, just the empty trail behind me. I put it in reverse again and started backing. Another impact, harder this time, making the whole truck shake. I stopped and got out, grabbing my flashlight. The trail behind me was blocked. A tree had fallen across it, a massive cedar that hadn't been there 2 minutes ago. I walked over to it, shined my light along its length. The tree was enormous, easily 6 feet in diameter, and it had fallen perfectly across the trail, blocking any further retreat. But the cut on the stump was fresh. Sawdust still clung to the wood, and the surface was clean and smooth. This tree had been cut. Recently. Deliberately. I walked around the fallen tree looking for a way past. There wasn't one. The forest on both sides was too dense, too overgrown. My truck would never fit through. I stood there in the darkness, rain starting to fall again, and realized I had only one option. Forward. Whatever was ahead on this trail, I had to drive toward it. I got back in my truck and started forward again, passing the stop sign, passing the go back sign. The trail continued into deeper forest, and I followed it because there was nothing else I could do. The trail got worse. Roots and rocks appeared in the ruts, forcing me to slow to a crawl. The trees pressed closer, their branches scraping along my trailer with a sound like claws on metal. In my headlights, I could see moisture on the bark, water running down the trunks in dark streams. Every few hundred yards, there was another sign. They were all different, all hand-painted on fresh wood, all nailed to trees at the same height. Turn around, too late, should have listened. They're watching not your trees. I tried to ignore them, but each one made my stomach tighten a little more. Someone was doing this. Someone was playing a sick game, and I was driving right into it. But what choice did I have? The trail behind me was blocked. Forward was the only option. At some point, I'm not sure when, I realized the forest had changed. The trees were different now. Older. Darker. They looked almost petrified. The bark turned black and hard like stone. And they were arranged wrong. Not randomly, the way trees grow naturally, but in patterns. Rows and circles, like someone had planted them deliberately. I came around a curve and saw structures ahead. Not buildings exactly, but frameworks made of branches and logs, lashed together with what looked like vines or rope. They formed archways over the trail, forcing me to drive beneath them. Each archway was maybe 12 feet high, just tall enough for my loaded truck to pass under. As I drove through the first archway, I heard something fall onto my trailer, a heavy thump, like a large rock or a piece of wood. I checked my mirrors but couldn't see what had fallen. Another thump as I passed under the second archway, and then a third. By the time I'd driven through all 5 archways, there were at least a dozen impacts on my trailer. I could hear them rolling around back there, whatever they were, shifting and settling with each bump in the road. The trail opened into another clearing, larger than the first. This one was maybe 3 acres, roughly circular, and it was wrong in a way I couldn't immediately define. The ground was too flat, too level, like it had been graded by machinery. But there were no tire tracks, no equipment marks, nothing to suggest how it had been leveled. In the center of the clearing was a building, or what was left of one. It might have been a cabin once, but now it was just a shell. 4 walls of weathered wood, no roof, windows like empty eye sockets. The door hung open, and I could see darkness inside, deeper than the darkness around it. I stopped my truck at the edge of the clearing, unwilling to drive any closer to that structure. Sat there with the engine running, trying to figure out what to do next. The trail continued on the other side of the clearing. I could see where it entered the trees again, winding away into deeper forest. If I crossed the clearing and followed that trail, maybe it would lead me to the main road. Maybe. Or maybe it would lead me deeper into whatever this place was. I looked at the small wooden box on my passenger seat, the one Raymond had given me. "Don't open it," he'd said. "Part of the load. Needs to stay with the logs." I picked up the box and shook it gently again. That same soft, sliding sound, like sand or grain, or like something organic, something that had once been alive. The rain was coming down harder now, hammering on my cab roof. I turned on my wipers and stared out at the clearing, at that ruined building in its center, and made a decision. I was getting out of here. Whatever was on the other side of this clearing, whatever was down that trail, I was going to drive through it and find my way back to civilization. I'd been driving these mountains for 22 years. I knew how to navigate, how to read terrain, how to find my way out of difficult situations. I put the truck in gear and started across the clearing. The ground was soft, mud squelching under my tires, but the truck had good traction and kept moving. I gave the ruined building a wide berth, not wanting to get any closer to it than necessary. Halfway across the clearing, my headlights caught movement in the building's doorway. Something pale, something tall, shifting in the darkness. I hit the brakes instinctively, and my truck slid slightly in the mud before stopping. I stared at the doorway. Nothing moved now. Whatever I'd seen, or thought I'd seen, was gone. I started moving again, faster this time, and I didn't look back at the building. Kept my eyes fixed on the trail ahead, on the gap in the trees where the trail continued. I was almost to the edge of the clearing when I heard it, a voice calling from somewhere behind me. A man's voice, rough and urgent. "Foster, stop!" I knew that voice. It was Raymond Coldwater. I hit the brakes again and looked in my mirrors. There, standing in the middle of the clearing, was a figure. It was too far away to see clearly in the rain and darkness, but it looked like Raymond. Same height, same build, same work clothes. The figure waved at me, both arms over its head, the universal signal for stop. I grabbed my CB radio even though I knew it wouldn't work out here. "Raymond, is that you?" No response, just static. The figure kept waving, kept calling. I could barely hear the words over the rain and the rumble of my engine, but it sounded like, "Stop, don't go, wrong way." I put the truck in neutral and sat there, torn. If that was really Raymond, if he'd followed me somehow, then maybe he could guide me out of here. Maybe he knew another route, a better route. But everything in my gut was screaming that it wasn't Raymond, that it was something else, something wearing his shape, trying to make me stop. I looked at the trail ahead, then back at the figure in the clearing. It had started walking toward my truck now, moving fast. Too fast. People don't move that way, with that gliding, effortless speed. I put the truck in gear and hit the gas. The engine roared, the tires spun in the mud and then caught. The truck surged forward, across the last stretch of clearing and into the trees beyond. In my mirror, I saw the figure stop at the edge of the clearing. It stood there for a moment, and then it raised both arms again, but not to wave, to point. Pointing down the trail I was driving, like it was showing me where I was going, where I was being led. I drove faster, probably too fast for the conditions, but I didn't care. I had to get away from that clearing, from that figure, from whatever this place was. The trail descended now, winding down a hillside through trees that were so massive they blocked out the sky completely. My headlights seemed weaker here, barely penetrating the darkness. I could see maybe 20 feet ahead, no more. I came around a tight switchback and nearly drove into them. 2 more structures, one on each side of the trail like guard posts flanking a gate. They were made of logs and branches built into the shape of crude towers, maybe 15 feet tall. At the top of each tower I could see something hanging. Shapes, dark and irregular, swaying in the wind. I slowed down as I passed between the towers, and that's when I saw what was hanging from them. Animals. Deer, I thought, though it was hard to tell in the darkness. They'd been gutted and hung by their hind legs, their bodies moving in the rain. But the smell was wrong. Dead animals, especially ones that had been hanging for a while, they smell a certain way, decay, rot, that sweet sick odor of decomposition. These didn't smell like that. They smelled like cedar, like fresh-cut wood. I drove past the towers and kept going, my hands shaking on the wheel. I wanted to stop, wanted to turn around, wanted to abandon my truck and run. But there was nowhere to run to. I was miles from any road, any help, any safety. The trail leveled out and entered what looked like an old logging area. I could see stumps here, dozens of them, arranged in rows. But they were ancient, weathered, almost smooth, covered in moss and ferns. This area hadn't been logged in 50 years, maybe more. Between the stumps, someone had placed objects. I couldn't tell what they were at first, but as I drove closer, my headlights illuminated them. Tools. Axes and saws, hammers and wedges, all of them rusted and ancient, all of them driven into the ground like markers or monuments. And beyond the tools, I saw the chains. Heavy logging chains, the kind used to drag timber out of the forest, strung between the stumps like barriers or borders. The chains were old, encrusted with rust, but they looked intact, still functional if anyone wanted to use them. I drove slowly through this area, weaving between stumps and chains and planted tools. The whole time, I had the feeling I was trespassing, violating some boundary I didn't understand. The trail exited the logged area and entered forest again, but this forest was different. The trees here weren't cedars anymore. They were Douglas firs, but wrong somehow. The bark was the right color, the needles the right shape, but they felt wrong, like they were copies, imitations, things pretending to be trees. I'd been driving for almost 2 hours since leaving the first clearing. My fuel gauge was dropping, already down to half a tank. At the rate I was using fuel on this rough terrain, I had maybe 3 more hours before I ran dry. I had to find the main road, had to get out of this forest before my truck died and I was stuck here. The trail climbed again, winding up another hillside. The rain had stopped, but the mist had gotten thicker, reducing visibility even further. I was driving almost blind, following the ruts more by feel than by sight. At the top of the hill, the trail forked, 2 paths leading in different directions, both disappearing into the mist. There were no signs, no markers, nothing to indicate which way to go. I stopped and got out, leaving the engine running. Walked to the fork and examined both paths. They looked identical. Same width, same condition, same dense forest on either side. I was standing there trying to decide when I heard the sound. It came from somewhere in the forest to my left, distant but clear. The crack of an axe striking wood. Then another crack and another, settling into a steady rhythm. Someone was cutting timber, out here in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night. I got back in my truck and sat there listening. The axe blows continued, rhythmic and mechanical. Whoever was swinging that axe, they'd been doing it for a while. They had stamina, experience. Or they were something that didn't get tired. I chose the right-hand path, away from the sound of the axe. The trail descended again, dropping into a valley thick with mist. My headlights were almost useless now, the beams diffusing into the fog. I slowed to maybe 10 miles an hour, inching forward, afraid of driving off the trail or into a tree. That's when I started seeing them. Figures in the mist, standing among the trees. They were tall and thin, almost skeletal, and they didn't move. Just stood there watching my truck pass. I told myself they were just trees, just trunks and branches that my tired mind was shaping into human forms. But they were too regular, too evenly spaced, and they were on both sides of the trail, forming lines that paralleled my route. I kept driving, kept my eyes fixed straight ahead, and tried not to look at the figures. Tried not to see the way their heads turned to follow my truck, or the way they started moving, stepping forward, closing in. The CB radio crackled to life again, making me jump. "They don't want you to leave," a woman's voice this time, young, frightened. I grabbed the handset. "Who is this? How are you on my frequency?" "We're all on your frequency," the voice said. "Everyone who came here, everyone who tried to take the trees. We're all here, Daniel. We've been here for years. Some of us for decades." "What are you talking about?" "The forest doesn't let you leave. Not once you've taken from it. Not once you've loaded the timber. You're part of it now, part of the cycle. You'll drive these trails forever, looking for the way out. and you'll never find it. That's insane. There has to be a way out. There is, the voice said. But you won't take it. None of us do. We're too stubborn, too sure we can navigate, too convinced we know these mountains. So we drive and drive and drive, and the forest just keeps changing, keeps leading us deeper, until our fuel runs out and our trucks stop, and we become part of it too. I looked at my fuel gauge. Just under half a tank now. How many are there? I asked. How many drivers? I don't know. I've heard 17 different voices on the radio, but there might be more. Some of us stopped talking years ago. What's your name? Sarah Reeves. I've been here since 2019. Took a load of cedar out of a place called Coldwater Creek. Never made it to the mill. My blood went cold. Coldwater Creek? You too? Jesus, how does he keep finding drivers? How does he keep sending people in here? Raymond Coldwater, he hired you. Through a broker, yeah. Said it was private land, old-growth cedar, good money. I should have known better. I should have known when he gave me that box. I looked at the wooden box sitting on my passenger seat. What's in the box, Sarah? There was a long pause, then, I don't know. I never opened it. But I can hear it sometimes, late at night when the engine's off and everything's quiet. It whispers. It tells me things. What kind of things? About the forest. About what it wants. About what it needs to keep growing. It needs us, Daniel. Our trucks, our fuel, our metal. It breaks us down, absorbs us, uses us to expand. Every truck that comes in here, every driver who takes the load, we become part of it. We feed it. I'm not going to feed it, I said. I'm getting out of here. We all said that. We all tried. Good luck. The radio went dead again. I tried calling Sarah back but got no response. I drove through the mist for another hour. The trail kept winding, kept changing, sometimes climbing, sometimes descending, never leading anywhere recognizable. The figures in the mist stayed with me the whole time, walking parallel to my truck, keeping pace effortlessly. My fuel gauge dropped to a quarter tank. I was starting to panic now, really panic, when the trail suddenly opened up and I saw lights ahead. Real lights, electric lights, shining through the mist. I almost sobbed with relief. I drove toward the lights and emerged into a clearing. A large clearing, maybe 5 acres, with several buildings. And trucks. God, there were trucks everywhere, logging trucks. Dozens of them parked in rows. Some of them looked recent, from the last decade. Others were ancient, from the 50s and 60s, rusted and deteriorating. And every single one of them was loaded, fully loaded with cedar logs, chains in place, ready to drive. But none of them were running, none of them had moved in years. I pulled my truck into the clearing and stopped, staring at the scene. This was where they all ended up. All the drivers who'd taken loads from Coldwater Creek, all the trucks that never made it to the mill. They were all here, waiting in silent rows, their cargoes still bound. I got out and walked among the trucks, shining my flashlight into cabs. Some were empty, others weren't. In those, I could see shapes slumped over steering wheels or leaning against windows. Drivers who'd run out of fuel and died here, in this clearing, still waiting for a way out. I reached the nearest occupied truck and looked in. The driver was skeletal, reduced to bones and dried skin, still wearing a flannel shirt and jeans. On the dashboard in front of him was a small wooden box, identical to the one Raymond had given me. I walked to the next truck, and the next. Every one that had a body also had a box. Every one. I ran back to my own truck and grabbed the box from the passenger seat, held it up to my ear and listened. At first, there was nothing. Then, very faintly, I heard it. A whisper, so quiet I almost missed it. Feed the forest. Feed the trees. Let them grow. Let them spread. I threw the box as hard as I could. It hit the ground maybe 20 feet away and cracked open, spilling its contents. In my flashlight beam, I could see what had been inside. Seeds. Hundreds of tiny cedar seeds, dark and glossy, already starting to sprout in the damp soil. As I watched, they grew. Impossibly fast, unnaturally fast, sending out roots and stems. Within seconds, they were saplings. Within a minute, they were young trees, already taller than me, and they were spreading. Advancing across the clearing toward my truck, toward all the trucks, wrapping around axles and wheels and undercarriages. I jumped back into my cab and started the engine, put it in reverse and backed away from the advancing growth. But as I moved, I could see other boxes starting to open, the ones on the dashboards of the dead trucks, the ones scattered on the ground throughout the clearing. All of them were cracking, splitting, releasing their seeds. The whole clearing was coming alive with new growth. Cedar trees erupting from the soil, growing at impossible speeds, reaching towards the sky. I spun the wheel and drove towards the edge of the clearing, towards the gap in the trees where the trail continued. The young cedars were already blocking some of the exits, but I found one still open and drove through, branches whipping against my cab. In my mirror, I could see the clearing disappearing behind a wall of new trees. The trucks were being swallowed, absorbed into the growing forest. Within minutes, there would be no sign they'd ever existed. I drove through darkness and mist for hours. The trail never ended, never led anywhere, just kept winding through endless forest. My fuel gauge dropped to 1/8 of a tank, then lower. The engine started to sputter occasionally, warning me that I was running on fumes. Every few miles I'd see another sign. You can't leave the forest keeps what it takes. Part of the cycle, feed the trees. I tried the CB radio constantly, cycling through channels, calling for help. Sometimes I got static. Sometimes I got voices, other drivers, other lost souls, all of them telling me the same thing. There's no way out. Sarah came back on at one point. How much fuel do you have left? Not much, maybe 30 miles. When it runs out, you'll be like us, stuck here waiting, slowly becoming part of it. The forest is patient. It doesn't care how long it takes. There has to be a way out. There has to be. There is, she said. But you have to give it something. Give it what? The load. Unchain the logs. Let them go. Give back what you took. I looked in my mirror at the 3 massive cedar logs on my flatbed. They were worth thousands of dollars. They were my payment, my compensation for this nightmare. If I give back the logs, I get nothing. This whole trip is for nothing. If you keep the logs, you get nothing anyway. You'll die here like we all did. Is the money worth that? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Think about it, Sarah said. You don't have much time. The radio went silent. I drove on. The trail climbed another hill, steeper than before, and my engine strained with the weight of the load. The fuel gauge was on empty now, the warning light glowing red. I had maybe 10 miles left, maybe less. At the top of the hill, I found another clearing, smaller than the last one, maybe an acre, with a single structure in the center. Not a building this time, but an altar. That's the only word for it. A raised platform made of logs, with steps leading up to the top. On the platform was a fire pit, cold and dark, filled with ashes. I stopped my truck at the edge of the clearing and got out. Walked slowly toward the altar, my flashlight beam cutting through the mist. The ashes in the fire pit weren't from wood. They were too fine, too powdery. I crouched down and touched them, and they felt gritty between my fingers. like ground bone. Carved into the logs that formed the altar were words. I couldn't read most of them. They were in a language I didn't recognize, or maybe they'd been worn away by weather and time. But one phrase was clear, carved deeper than the rest. What is taken must be given back. I stood there looking at those words for a long time. Then I walked back to my truck, climbed up onto the flatbed, and started removing chains. It took me 30 minutes to unchain the 3 cedar logs. They were heavy, and I had to use a come-along winch to shift them, but eventually I got all 3 free. I hooked a cable around the first log and dragged it off the trailer, letting it roll down onto the ground. Then the second, then the third. They lay there in the clearing, massive and dark. 3 trees that had stood for hundreds of years and would now remain here, in this forgotten place, forever. I climbed back into my cab, hands shaking, and started the engine. The warning light was still glowing, the fuel gauge still on empty, but the engine caught and held. I put the truck in gear and drove forward, leaving the logs behind. The trail changed immediately. The mist started to thin. The trees pulled back, giving me more room. And ahead, through the thinning fog, I could see something I hadn't seen in hours. Stars. Real stars in a real sky. I drove faster, following the trail as it descended the far side of the hill. The forest was opening up, becoming normal again. Regular trees, normal spacing. No more watching figures or planted tools or chain barriers. After maybe 10 minutes, I saw pavement ahead. Real pavement. A 2-lane road cutting through the forest. Forest Service Road 46. I pulled onto it and stopped. Just sat there for a moment, breathing hard, not quite believing I'd made it. Behind me, the trail I'd come down was already disappearing. The gap in the trees closing up, branches weaving together. Within minutes, there was no sign the trail had ever existed. I drove down Forest Service Road 46 until I hit Highway 22. Turned west toward Salem, toward home. My fuel gauge was still on empty, the warning light still glowing, but somehow the engine kept running. I drove for an hour on fumes, past Detroit, past the last of the mountain towns, down into the valley. By the time I reached Salem, dawn was breaking. The fuel light had been on for over 90 miles, which should have been impossible. But the truck kept running, kept carrying me home. I pulled into my driveway at 6:47 a.m., shut off the engine, and just sat there. I'd made it. I was alive. I was home. But I'd lost the load. 60,000 pounds of prime cedar, worth thousands of dollars, left behind in a clearing that probably didn't exist anymore. I called Marcus an hour later and told him I couldn't deliver the logs. Told him there'd been an accident, a road washout, and I'd had to abandon the load. He was angry, but what could he do? These things happen sometimes. He asked if I'd at least gotten paid by Raymond Coldwater. I checked my wallet. The $3,200 bills were still there, real as anything. Yeah, I told Marcus. I got paid. Then you came out ahead, at least. Sorry about the logs. I didn't tell him the truth. Didn't tell him about the trail, the signs, the clearing full of abandoned trucks. What would be the point? He'd think I was crazy, or lying, or both. I tried to call Raymond Coldwater, but the number Marcus had given me was disconnected. I searched online for Coldwater Creek Timber, for Raymond Coldwater, for any record of the operation. Nothing. No business license, no tax records, no property ownership. As far as official records were concerned, neither Raymond nor his logging operation existed. I told myself it was over. I'd made it out. I'd survived. I was safe. But 3 nights later, I heard the knock. It started subtly, a creak in the walls, the kind of sound old houses make as they settle. A whisper in the pipes, water moving through plumbing. Normal sounds, easy to ignore. But they came at the same time every night. Exactly 3:47 a.m., the same time I'd left the cedar logs in that clearing. I'd wake up to those sounds, the creaking, the whispering, and I'd lie in bed listening, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Just the house, just the wind, just my imagination. The first few nights, I managed to go back to sleep. Told myself it was stress, exhaustion, my mind playing tricks after what I'd been through. But on the fourth night, I realized the creaking had a pattern. It moved through the house in a deliberate path, starting in the living room, moving down the hallway, stopping outside my bedroom door. I lay there frozen, listening to whatever it was pause at my door. The handle didn't turn. The door didn't open, but I could hear breathing on the other side. Slow, deep breaths, like someone standing there waiting. After maybe 10 minutes, the breathing stopped and the creaking moved away, back down the hall, fading into silence. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Then, after about a week, I noticed the smell. Cedar. Faint at first, so subtle I thought I was imagining it. But it got stronger each day until my whole house smelled like fresh-cut wood. I checked everywhere, the attic, the basement, the walls, the floors, looking for the source, for some explanation. There was none. The smell just was, permeating everything. I tried opening all the windows, running fans, buying air fresheners. Nothing worked. The cedar smell was in the walls themselves, in the foundation, in every board and beam of the house. It was like the structure itself was transforming, becoming something else. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, stopped me one morning as I was leaving for work. "Daniel, is everything all right? I've been seeing lights in your windows at strange hours." "Just working late," I told her. She looked at me with concern. "And that smell, like a lumber yard. Are you doing renovations?" "No renovations. Must be something in the neighborhood." She frowned. "I only smell it near your house. Nowhere else on the street." I made an excuse and got in my truck, but her words stayed with me. The smell was localized, centered on my house, on me. 2 weeks after I got back, I started finding sawdust, small piles of it, appearing overnight in corners and closets. I'd sweep it up, throw it away, and the next morning there'd be more, always in different places, always the same reddish-brown color as the cedar logs I'd left behind. The sawdust wasn't random. I started keeping track, marking where I found it each day. After a week, I saw the pattern. The piles were forming a circle around my bed, a perfect circle, expanding outward day by day. Whatever was happening, it was centered on me. I tried sleeping in different rooms, the couch, the spare bedroom, even the floor in the kitchen. Didn't matter. The next morning, the sawdust circle would have moved with me, reforming around wherever I'd slept. I called in a contractor to inspect the house. His name was Bill Norris, came highly recommended. He went through it top to bottom, checking every beam and joist and stud. Found nothing wrong. The structure was sound, no rot, no infestation, no reason for sawdust to appear. "Honestly, Mr. Foster, this is the most solid house I've seen in years," he said, packing up his tools. "Whatever's causing your problem, it's not structural. Might want to call an exterminator, check for powder post beetles or something." He handed me his business card and left. I set the card on my kitchen table and went to take a shower. When I came back 15 minutes later, the card was still there. But someone had written on it, in pencil, in handwriting I didn't recognize. "The forest remembers." My hands started shaking. I picked up the card, turned it over. The writing was on the back, clear as day, in precise block letters. I threw it away, took it outside to the trash can, buried it under other garbage, put the lid on tight. The next morning, it was back on the table. Same card, same writing, like I'd never thrown it away. I burned it that day. Took it out to my backyard, put it in an old metal trash can and set it on fire. Watched it curl and blacken and turn to ash. The next morning, the card was on the table again. Pristine, unburned, with the same message on the back. I stopped trying to get rid of it after that. It wanted to be there, and apparently, there was nothing I could do about it. The dreams started around the same time. Every night, as soon as I fell asleep, I was back in the forest. Walking the trails, passing the signs, seeing the watching figures among the trees. But these dreams were different from memories. In them, I could see things I hadn't seen when I was actually there. I saw the history of the place, saw loggers from 100 years ago cutting the first trees, building the first camps, saw them disappear one by one, consumed by something they didn't understand. Saw their equipment left to rust, their camps abandoned, their names forgotten. I saw Raymond Coldwater, not as the old man I'd met, but as a young man, maybe 30, making the same deal with the forest his father had made, and his father before him. Offering drivers, offering blood, offering fuel and metal and flesh in exchange for being allowed to live on that land. It's hungry, Dream Raymond told me. It's always been hungry. It needs to expand, to grow, to spread beyond the boundaries. And we feed it. That's the arrangement. That's always been the arrangement. Why me? I asked in the dream. Why did you choose me? I didn't choose you, he said. The forest did. It calls to certain people, people who are compatible, people who can carry the seeds far from here. You heard the call, even if you didn't know it. That's why you answered my summons. That's why you took the load. I woke from these dreams drenched in sweat. The smell of cedar so strong it was like sleeping in a forest. The contractor's card stayed on my table, and every few days a new message would appear below the first. You took what wasn't yours. The debt must be paid. Feed the forest. Let it grow. I stopped inviting people over. Couldn't explain the smell, the sawdust, the messages appearing on business cards. Couldn't explain why my house felt different, wrong, like it was slowly ceasing to be a house and becoming something else. I started having dreams. Not nightmares exactly, but visions, I guess you'd call them. I'd dream about the clearing with the altar, about the 3 cedar logs lying there in the mist. And in the dreams, the logs would start to grow. Roots would push out from the cut ends, digging into the soil. Branches would sprout from the bark, reaching toward the sky. The trees were regenerating, coming back to life. And I knew, in the way you know things in dreams, that it was because of me, because I'd taken them, because I'd chained them and hauled them away from their home. And even though I'd given them back, the forest wasn't done with me. In some dreams I could see other drivers, men and women I'd never met, standing in that same clearing, watching their own loads regenerate. Some of them were transparent, like ghosts. Others looked solid, real, but their eyes were empty, hollow. One of them spoke to me once. An older man in a flannel shirt from the 1970s, judging by the style. "You think you got away," he said. "You think because you made it home, you're safe. But the forest doesn't work like that. The forest is patient. It grows slow, but it grows steady. And it always collects its debts." "How long have you been here?" I asked him in the dream. "Since 1978. Took a load of cedar from Raymond's grandfather. Thought I'd made a clean getaway. Then the trees started growing in my house, in my truck, in my body." He pulled up his shirt, and I could see bark growing under his skin, rough and dark. Eventually, you stop fighting it. Eventually, you go back. We all go back. Where are you now? I mean, in the real world? He smiled, and I could see moss between his teeth. I'm in the forest. I'm in the trees. I'm in the soil. I'm everywhere the seeds have spread. And soon, you'll be too. I woke from one of these dreams at 3:47 a.m. to find my bedroom full of saplings, young cedar trees, maybe a foot tall, growing up through my floorboards. Dozens of them filling the room, their branches swaying even though there was no breeze. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and they were gone. But the smell of cedar was overpowering, and there was sawdust on my sheets. I got out of bed and turned on every light in the house, checked every room, every corner, looking for evidence of the saplings. Found nothing. But when I went back to my bedroom, there were small holes in the floorboards. Dozens of them, each about the diameter of a pencil, arranged in the exact pattern the saplings had been. I got down on my hands and knees and looked into one of the holes. It went down through the floor, through the subfloor, into the crawlspace beneath the house. And in the beam of my flashlight, I could see something down there, something green and growing. I went outside in my pajamas and crawled under the house with my flashlight. The crawlspace was maybe 2 feet high, dirt floor, spider webs everywhere. I crawled through it, sweeping my light back and forth until I found what I was looking for. Roots. Dozens of them, thick as my thumb, spreading through the dirt under my house. They were fresh, new, and they glowed slightly in the darkness. A pale green bioluminescence that pulsed like a heartbeat. I followed one of the roots to its source and found a sapling growing up against the foundation. It had pushed through a crack in the concrete, roots spreading into the crawlspace, trunk rising up toward the floorboards of my bedroom. I grabbed the sapling and tried to pull it up. The roots held firm. I pulled harder, putting my full weight into it, and the sapling didn't budge. It was like trying to uproot an oak tree. Impossible. I crawled back out and went inside, washed the dirt off my hands, and sat at my kitchen table trying to think. The forest was already here. Already in my house, the saplings in my bedroom hadn't been a dream or a hallucination. They were real, just invisible in waking life. Growing beneath my floors, waiting. I called a foundation specialist the next day, told him I had roots under my house that needed to be dealt with. He came out, crawled under, and spent an hour examining the space. "Mr. Foster, I've got good news and bad news," he said when he emerged, covered in cobwebs. "Good news is your foundation is solid. Bad news is you've got some kind of root system under there that I've never seen before. It's extensive, really extensive, and it's growing fast. Can you remove it?" "I can try, but I'm not sure it would do any good. These roots, they're not from any tree in your yard. They're not from anywhere nearby that I can see. It's like they just appeared under your house spontaneously. What do you recommend?" He pulled off his gloves and shook his head. "Honestly, I'd recommend selling the house and moving. Whatever this is, it's not going to stop. And if these roots keep growing, they'll compromise your foundation eventually. Could take years, could take months, but it'll happen." After he left, I went online and started looking at real estate listings. Maybe he was right. Maybe I should just cut my losses, sell the house, move somewhere far away, start over. But when I tried to list the house, the real estate agent took one walkthrough and declined to represent me. "Mr. Foster, I can't sell this house in good conscience. The smell alone would keep buyers away, and there's something off about the place. I can't put my finger on it, but I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never felt like this in a house before." I tried 3 more agents. Same response from all of them. One of them told me bluntly, This house feels haunted, like it's alive. I won't go back in there. So I was stuck. Couldn't sell. Couldn't leave. Couldn't stop what was growing. I stopped sleeping in my bedroom after that. Started sleeping on the couch with all the lights on, the TV playing, anything to keep from slipping into those dreams. But the house kept changing. I'd come home from running errands and find that a doorway had moved, or a room was slightly different dimensions, or there was a new shadow in a corner that didn't match any light source. The walls were breathing. I could see it if I watched carefully, a slow expansion and contraction, like lungs. The breathing matched the pattern of the sounds at 3:47 a.m. In and out, slow and steady, the rhythm of something alive. I put my hand against a wall one day just to confirm I wasn't imagining it. The surface was warm, not hot but warm, like flesh. And I could feel a pulse under my palm, slow and steady, matching the breathing. I pulled my hand away and saw that I'd left a handprint, not in dust or dirt, but in the wall itself. My palm had sunk maybe half an inch into the drywall, leaving a perfect impression. The impression filled in slowly over the next few minutes, the wall material flowing back into place like water. By the time it was done, there was no sign I'd touched it at all. 3 weeks after getting back, I found a sapling growing in my bathtub. A real one this time, not a vision or a dream. It was maybe 2 feet tall, roots pushing down through the drain, branches spreading against the tile walls. I tried to pull it up, but the roots were already too deep, too strong. The tree had bark that looked almost metallic in the bathroom light, and when I touched it, it was warm, alive. The leaves were a deep green, almost black, and they moved even though there was no air circulation in the bathroom. I called a plumber. He stared at the tree for a long minute, then looked at me. How did this get here? I don't know. It just grew. Trees don't grow through plumbing, Mr. Foster. It's not possible. The pipes are PVC, sealed. There's no way for roots to penetrate them. But even as he said it, he was looking at the roots clearly growing down through the drain. He tried to pull the tree up. Couldn't budge it. He tried cutting the roots with a saw, but the blade wouldn't bite. It was like trying to saw through steel. I've never seen anything like this, he said finally. I can't help you. I don't even know what this is. He left without charging me, just got in his truck and drove away quickly, like he couldn't get away from my house fast enough. After he left, I went back to look at the sapling. It had doubled in size, now almost 4 feet tall, growing visibly, adding inches every hour. The bathroom was filling with the smell of cedar, so strong it was almost choking. I closed the bathroom door and put a towel against the crack at the bottom, trying to contain the smell. It didn't work. By evening, the entire house reeked of cedar. That night, I packed a bag and left. Went to a motel on the outskirts of Salem, checked in under a fake name, and tried to figure out what to do. I stayed at the motel for 3 days. Didn't go home, didn't go near my house. Thought maybe if I stayed away long enough, whatever was happening would stop. On the 3rd night, I woke up at 3:47 a.m. to the smell of cedar. I turned on the lights and saw sawdust on the carpet, forming a trail from the door to my bed. The forest had found me. I checked out that morning and drove. Didn't know where I was going, just drove. Ended up in Portland. Got a room at a different motel, one I'd never been to before. Same thing. Sawdust appearing overnight, the smell of cedar, saplings growing in the bathroom. I tried 3 more motels, in 3 different cities. Each time, the forest found me within days. That's when I started getting the calls. My phone would ring at odd hours, and when I answered, there'd be static, then voices. Drivers, like Sarah. People who'd taken loads from Coldwater Creek and never made it out. They all had the same message. It doesn't end. The forest is everywhere now. We tried to take from it, and now it's taking from us. Our houses, our cars, our possessions, everything's being absorbed. Broken down. Turned into mulch and soil. We're feeding it, just like it always wanted. One of them told me about a guy named Marcus Healy who'd been a broker. Used to send drivers up to Coldwater Creek, the voice said. Must have sent a dozen over the years. Last month, they found his office overgrown with cedar trees. Burst up through the foundation, grew straight through the building. They're still trying to figure out how. Marcus is gone, no one knows where. I tried calling Marcus. My Marcus, the broker who'd hired me. His phone was disconnected. His office, when I drove past, was boarded up. A for lease sign in the window. I started researching, digging through old logging records, Forest Service reports, historical documents, looking for anything about Coldwater Creek, about Raymond, about that section of forest that doesn't appear on maps. The Salem Public Library had an archive section in the basement. Dusty boxes full of old newspapers and documents that hadn't been digitized. I spent days down there going through everything I could find related to logging operations in the Cascades. What I found were stories. Dozens of them, going back over a century. Stories about loggers who went into that forest and never came out. About logging operations that failed inexplicably. Equipment breaking down, crews disappearing. About a family named Coldwater who'd bought land there in 1887 and had lived there ever since, isolated from the world. The first mention I found was from an 1889 newspaper, the Salem Statesman Journal. A small article, barely 3 paragraphs. Local logging concern abandons operation. The Cascade Timber Company has ceased operations in the Coldwater Creek area after the disappearance of 6 loggers over the past 3 months. Company foreman James Mitchell stated that the men walked into the forest and never returned, despite extensive search efforts. The area has been deemed too dangerous for continued work. The land has been purchased by Raymond Coldwater Sr., a local landowner, for an undisclosed sum. I found more articles after that. A 1903 report of a logging crew that vanished entirely, all 12 men gone without a trace. A 1924 story about a mill worker who claimed to have seen walking trees in the Coldwater area. A 1936 account of a forest fire that burned for 3 weeks but somehow left the Coldwater land completely untouched. And every generation, there were reports. Drivers hired to haul timber from Coldwater land. Some made it out, like me. Most didn't. The ones who did, they all reported the same things. Strange trails, watching figures, clearings full of abandoned trucks. I found a particularly detailed account from 1956, written by a driver named Thomas Briggs. He'd published his story in a small logging trade magazine, probably thinking no one would believe him anyway. I took a job hauling old-growth cedar from the Coldwater property in late September. The money was good, double the normal rate, and I needed it. Raymond Coldwater Jr. met me at the turnoff and guided me up to the cutting site. The road was rough but passable. What struck me immediately was the silence. No birds, no wind, nothing. Just those massive trees standing like sentinels. Raymond was cordial enough, helped me load 3 enormous logs, and sent me on my way. I made it home to Eugene without incident, but within a week, strange things started happening. I'd find sawdust in my truck, even though I'd cleaned it thoroughly. The smell of cedar was everywhere, following me, and trees started appearing in impossible places. I woke one morning to find a sapling growing in my kitchen sink. By that evening, it was 6 feet tall. I tried to cut it down, but my saw wouldn't bite the wood. I tried to pull it out, but it wouldn't budge. Within a month, my house was completely overgrown. Trees grew through the walls, the roof, the floors. The city condemned it, said it was a safety hazard. They tried to tear it down, but their equipment kept breaking. Eventually, they just sealed it off and left it. I'm writing this from a motel room in Portland. I can't stay in one place more than a few days before the trees find me. I see them in my mirrors now, reflected surfaces showing forests where there should be walls. I hear them at night, their roots pushing up through concrete and asphalt, searching for me. I don't know how much longer I can run. The trees are patient, but they're also persistent. Eventually, they'll catch me. Eventually, I'll become part of them, just like all the others who took timber from Coldwater land. If you're reading this, and someone offers you a job hauling from Coldwater Creek, don't take it. No amount of money is worth what comes after. The article ended there. I searched for Thomas Briggs in death records and found nothing. No obituary, no grave, no trace of what happened to him. He just disappeared, like so many others. I kept digging and found references to the condemned house he'd mentioned. It was on Maple Street in Eugene, house number 847. According to city records, it had been sealed in 1957 and was still standing, or what was left of it. The property was owned by the city, listed as a hazardous site, off limits to the public. I drove to Eugene the next day, found Maple Street easily enough, but when I got to the address where 847 should have been, I found only forest. A dense stand of cedars, growing so thick you couldn't see more than a few feet into them. The trees were massive, far too large to have grown in just 60-some years. But I could see, just barely, the outline of structures among the trees. Walls absorbed into trunks, a roof collapsed and overgrown, window frames filled with branches. The house was still there, but it had become part of the forest. I stood at the edge of that growth for maybe 20 minutes staring into it, and I swear I saw movement in there. Shapes moving among the trees, too tall to be human but moving with deliberate intent. One of them came close to the edge, close enough that I could almost make out features. It was wrapped in bark, covered in moss, but underneath I could see the remnants of a face. Human features, barely recognizable, preserved somehow in the wood. The shape raised one arm toward me, and I saw its hand. Fingers too long, too thin, merged with branches. It was beckoning, calling me into the forest. I ran back to my truck and drove away, didn't stop until I was back in Salem. That night, I got another call. Not Sarah this time, but a man's voice I didn't recognize. "Daniel Foster? Who is this?" "My name was Thomas Briggs. I think you've been reading about me." My blood went cold. "That's not possible. You disappeared in the 50s. Disappeared from your world, maybe, but I'm still here, Daniel. I've been here for 67 years, walking these forests, becoming part of them, and I'm calling to warn you." "Warn me about what?" "The seeds are spreading faster now. The forest is expanding its reach. Used to be it took months, sometimes years, for the trees to fully take hold. But with each generation it gets faster. With you, it might only take weeks. How do I stop it?" "You can't stop it. You can only delay it. Keep moving, never stay in one place long enough for roots to establish. But eventually, you'll get tired. Eventually, you'll stop running. And when you do, the forest will be waiting." "There has to be another way." "There is," he said. "The same way I told you in my article. Go back. Return to where you took the timber from. Offer yourself willingly. The forest might accept that trade, might let you become part of it peacefully, instead of being consumed piece by piece. And if I don't, then you'll end up like me, caught between worlds, neither fully human nor fully tree, walking the borderlands, calling out warnings that no one heeds. It's not a good existence, Daniel. It's not really existence at all." The line went dead. I tried calling back, but the number showed as disconnected. I sat in my motel room that night, all the lights on, and thought about what he'd said. About going back, offering myself. About becoming part of the forest peacefully rather than fighting until the end. It would be easier, I knew that. Every day that passed, the struggle got harder. The forest was everywhere now, in my truck, in every room I rented, in my reflection in mirrors and windows. I could see myself changing, slowly, my skin taking on a rougher texture, like bark, my hair darkening, becoming more like pine needles, my fingers growing longer, more like branches. I was already becoming something else. The only question was whether I'd control the transformation or whether it would control me. I'm sitting in my truck right now writing this. It's the only place I feel even remotely safe. I've been living in it for the past 2 weeks, moving every night, never staying in one place long enough for the forest to take root. But I can see the signs. There's sawdust accumulating in the corners of the cab. The smell of cedar is getting stronger. And this morning, I found a crack in the dashboard, and something green was growing inside it. My fuel gauge has been on empty for 3 days. The truck should have died by now, but it keeps running, like something wants me mobile. Wants me to keep moving, spreading the seeds wherever I go. Because that's what I am now. A seed distributor. Everywhere I park, everywhere I stop for the night, I leave traces. Sawdust, sap, fragments of bark. And from those traces, trees will grow. I tried calling Sarah Reeves again last night. Got her on the CB somehow, even though I was in a Walmart parking lot in Tacoma, nowhere near those mountains. "Sarah," I said, "how do we stop this?" "We don't," she said. Her voice sounded different. Distant, like she was speaking from very far away. "We're part of the cycle now. The forest takes and the forest gives back. We took its trees, so it takes us. Fair trade. There has to be a way to break the cycle." "There is," she said. Go back. Go back to where you left the logs. Become part of the forest willingly. Stop running. Stop fighting. Just let it happen. That's what I did. That's what we all do eventually." "Where are you, Sarah?" "I'm in the forest. I'm in the trees. I'm in every cedar that grows from the seeds we spread. We're all here, Daniel. All the drivers, all the loggers, everyone who ever tried to take from the Coldwater land. We're all part of it now. And soon, you will be too." The transmission ended. I've thought about it. Going back. Driving up to those mountains, finding that trail somehow, returning to the clearing, lying down next to those 3 cedar logs and just letting it happen. Letting the roots take me, letting the forest absorb me. It would be easier than running. Easier than fighting something I can't possibly win against. But I'm not ready yet. Maybe I'm too stubborn, like Sarah said. Maybe I still think I can find a way out, a way to break free. Or maybe I'm just afraid of what comes after. The sun's setting now. I need to move again. Find a new place to park for the night. The saplings grow faster in the dark, and I don't want to wake up surrounded by trees. I can see them in my mirrors sometimes. Not reflections of what's behind me, but visions of what's coming. Forests spreading, cities being reclaimed, everything built by human hands being slowly absorbed back into the wild. And I wonder, maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe we took too much, for too long. Maybe the forest is just taking back what's rightfully its. I don't know anymore. I'm too tired to know. All I know is that I'm still driving, still moving, still trying to stay ahead of the growth. But my fuel gauge has been on empty for days, and the truck shouldn't still be running. Which means something wants me to keep going. Something wants me to spread the seeds, and I don't think I have a choice anymore. The forest is patient. It can wait. It's been waiting for over a century, absorbing drivers and loggers and anyone foolish enough to take its trees. It can wait for me, too. I just hope whoever finds this understands. If someone offers you a job hauling timber from Coldwater Creek, don't take it. Don't take the money, don't take the load, don't even take the call. Because there's no such thing as a simple logging run. And there's no such thing as getting out clean. Some debts can never be repaid. Some forests never let go. I can smell cedar right now, strong and overwhelming, like I'm surrounded by freshly cut logs. But there are no logs in my truck.